And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for making it. Let's go ahead and do a roll call just so that we can know who's on. We'll call all council members, and Ms. City Clerk, if you would please call the roll. Are you around? There you are.
Councilmember Sanchez.
He's trying to get on.
I can hear him like 2 offices down.
He's here.
Okay, Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Present here.
Okay. Councilmember Charette.
I'm here, thank you.
Councilmember Nickel.
Here.
Councilmember Richard.
Here.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Right here.
And Mayor Valdivia.
Here. Okay. Thank you, Ms. City Clerk. At this time, let's go ahead and do we have any public comments for closed session?
Yes, we have one.
Okay, if you would please.
There it goes.
This is the public comment for closed session for Treasurer Lateef. Council, as you guys look into your litigation that's posted on closed session tonight, what we see is a revolving list. You have your workers' comp, which is covered, but you also have pet-based towing, which isn't on there. You have the claim that Andrea Miller has filed. You have the claims of everybody that says the mayor sexually harassed them or caused a hostile work environment. We have Gigi and Gary's case, and just more and more pending litigation. Now, as we go into budget talks in this coming month, what is the overall cost between settlement and going to trial? Because we're broke. We're running out of money. And a lot of this litigation is completely self-inflicted by you sitting up there. More so the mayor, because he's just completely devious in all of his dealings with his employees. The ultimate goal is to make sure that San Bernardino does not financially fail. With all the projections heading that way, you guys need to start being proactive. You need to start looking at the cost benefit of settling or sitting in court. You already know that you don't make good decisions with what you did with Gigi and Gary's case in the first place. And now here we are all over again. And I ask you to really consider, talk to the city attorney, talk to the litigation teams, and find out what is going to be the best course of action of saving our city money that we are running out of quickly. Thank you.
That's the only comment for a closed session.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we'll go ahead and excuse staff members that don't need to be involved. And if you would, I'm assuming everyone's involved. Council and the Mayor and City Council acting successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the City of San Bernardino. At this time, I ask that everyone please, just for feedback purposes, if you could please mute your line, that would be helpful. We will go ahead and call to order our open session. And we, again, thank you for joining tonight, our council members and staff. This time, I will ask Councilman Nickel, would you, sir, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Please stand and join me as we pledge allegiance to the flag of our great nation. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilman. At this time, Ms. City Attorney, is there anything to report from closed session?
I'd just like to report that the City Council did unanimously vote to authorize the City Attorney's Office to file a receivership action on a nuisance abatement property. That's all the reportable action that I have.
Thank you very much, Ms. City Attorney. This time we'll move on to our presentations with the census update presented by San Bernardino County.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to participate at today's City's Council meeting. For me, it's a pleasure to provide our census updates. My name is Melissa Padilla. I am a partnership specialist for the City of San Bernardino, and I've been working with the census for around 1.5 years. Today, I want to talk about census operations adjustments to COVID-19 experimental pulse survey and a friendly reminder to respond to the census questionnaire. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the 2020 census underway and more households across America are responding every day. Online, phone, mail, self-response will continue through the data collection process. In light of the COVID-19 outbreak, the U.S. Census Bureau is adjusting the 2020 census operations in order to protect the health and safety of American public and Census Bureau's employees, implement guidance for federal, state, local authorities regarding the COVID-19, and ensure a complete and accurate count of all communities. Under this adjustment, the 2020 census operational plan field activities will resume after June 1st, 2020, as area census offices begin returning for full staff capacity. If we can move to the next slide, I'm going to talk about the operations updates. Right now, the self-response phase, it began on March 12th, and the deadline was going to be on July 31st. We just moved it for 3 months more. So now the deadline is October the 31st. Also, we have the group quarters operations started on April 2nd. The deadline was going to be on June 5th. Now it just moved to September the 3rd. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. And the update leaf, which is the census takers, they're going to drop invitations for respond on paper questionnaire at the door. It was going to be gone on March 15th, and the deadline, it was going to be on April the 17th. Now we're going to be gone on June 13th, and it's going to end up on July the 9th. So we're waiting for this operation. And lastly, the non-response follow-up. The original day was going to be May 13th, and the deadline was going to be July 31st. Now just move 3 more months. So now we're going to start the follow-up on August 11th, and it's going to end up on October the 31st. If we can move to the next slide, please. The next one. Awesome. So right now we have our experimental pulse survey to track temporal trends during pandemic. So basically this is designed to be a short turnaround instrument that will provide valuable data to aid in the post-pandemic recovery for households and small businesses. So besides the decennial that's happening right now, we also have the polls during the COVID-19, and this began on April 31st, and the Census Bureau will collect data for the next 90 days, and you can go to the website to see the results. And also, we have the self-response rate for the city of San Bernardino. Originally, this SNAP, I took it last week, we were at 54.3%. Right now, San Bernardino, the city of San Bernardino is at 55%. So it moved 0.7% from last week and today. And the overall self-response for California is 60%. We're doing good, but we would love to see those numbers move forward more better. So yes, so now we have as well our census jobs. We have many. Just need to go to www.census.gov/jobs. It's only 33 questions, and we need thousands of people to apply. So if you can help us provide this information, that will be awesome. And lastly, and most important, I want to make emphasis to help on the response 2020 census questionnaire. It's only 9 questions. You can go to the 2020 census.gov and respond it. And this way, we will make sure to have a complete and accurate count. And that's all for me. Thank you so much for letting me share this information with you guys. My information is on the last slide.
Thank you very much, Melissa. We appreciate it. Thank you for your attentiveness to our city and the care of the census. This is important in light of the COVID. We are still very concerned as community elected officials and leaders of our community. We're asking that individuals in our community continue to self-respond. That's really critical. About a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, I filled out the information online. And so this is important that we all do it and commit to do it. It takes maybe less than 10 minutes, I think. It took me less than 10 minutes. So it was reporting out on my family, and I know that the importance of it. We'll open it up for questions or comments. Councilman Nicole.
Yeah, so just to be clear, starting June 1st, you'll be getting back to more or less normal operations from what I understand.
Yes.
And then will that include door-to-door type visits of census workers? Or will they be, what will be the protocols? And I assume I'll probably be getting calls from people if and when there are people coming around knocking on doors. Is that something that will be adjusted? What might the public expect?
Yes, well, we're stressing out. We really want to have people to do the self-response, to go online or do it on phone or paper questionnaire, so nobody shows up at the door. However, we're adjusting ourselves with this transition with the COVID-19. So before our numerators, they were gonna go door to door. So now we might end up doing it through phone. However, we also gonna provide masks, gloves, and also hand sanitizer, and they will go training for COVID-19. But we're
So
trying.
should people be expecting if somebody knocks on the door and says they are a census worker, is that do we anticipate that that's a legitimate census worker knocking on their door?
Yes, that will be eventually once we have our non-response follow-up, and I believe that's going to be around, I think it's August. I went to the dates. They probably will go to the door. We're not sure. We're adjusting ourselves. We might end up going in person, or we might end up doing a follow-up on the phone.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Any other comments? If not, we appreciate it, Ms. Padilla. Thank you very much. We
Thank
wish
you,
you the best in your endeavors. Thank you. All right, at this time, let's move on to the second presentation for tonight, Fire District FP5 funding by Fire Chief Dan Muncy. Welcome, Dan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, City Manager. See a lot of great friends on tonight. First, I want to thank the city for their support and everything they've done for our firefighters. You've been a great partner in public safety for a long time. Tonight, Assistant Fire Chief Dan Hugh, who you know very well, your fire chief, will be presenting with me as we talk about FP5. Then go to the next slide, please. There are a lot of comments about FP5. Next slide. And a lot of citizens are very clear to say this is about funding for our fire department. And it's not a reflection of our firefighters. They do a great job every single day. We know that in San Bernardino, it's amazing some of the hazards that exist. Our firefighters are out there every single day mitigating those hazards, responding to those hazards, and more importantly, trying to prevent them from happening. Really quickly here, we're looking at our actual budget for the fire district. We have just over $200 million. For those of you that aren't familiar with our fire district, it's more than just San Bernardino City. It goes all the way from the city of Upland. It travels up through the mountains into the Wrightwood area, continues all the way out to the Kern County border, the LA County border, crosses over through Trona, goes all the way out into Death Valley, comes back down to Baker, goes all the way out to the city of Needles, down the Colorado River to Vidal Junction, and then through the Morongo Basin, including 29 Palms, Joshua Tree, and Yucca Valley. So quite a large area. We have just over 60 stations at this point. So we're primarily funded by three sources: our property taxes, and then we have fees, contracts, and other revenues. What that is either ambulance fees or the fees the fire marshal might charge. That's grant revenue that's also included in there, as well as our ambulance revenues. San Bernardino County Fire is the second largest ambulance provider in the county. We received some funding from the county general fund, and we also have a special tax called FP5. Now, FP5 is on the docket to be repealed in November. You can see that FP5 represents about a $41.5 million revenue source for the fire district. And this revenue is incredibly important for the city of San Bernardino. In 2016, when the city annexed into the county fire district, the city was on the brink of, it was in bankruptcy actually. And the city decided that they'd do a partial allocation of property taxes to fund fire service, but also annex into that special tax. FP5 is $157 and some change a year. And that funds fire protection for San Bernardino City. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's three different ways that FP5 has come about. That's our special tax. The first was a voter-approved special tax, a 2/3 vote in the community of Hellendale. And in 2007, Hellendale decided they wanted a full-time fire station, and to raise the funds, they voted in that parcel tax. Later, 4 different cities annexed into the Fire Protection District and into FP5. That includes San Bernardino. The portion that San Bernardino receives in FP5 revenue is $7.8 million. So in November of this year, the voters will be deciding whether San Bernardino should have $7.8 million of fire protection or not. A repeal of this vote would immediately affect fire protection in San Bernardino City. I'll talk about the impacts here shortly, but that's about 40% of your overall fire safety budget. Then you can see later that there was a board-approved FP5 expansion. That was, San Bernardino City was not part of that, but the surrounding communities are. They also pay the FP5. That includes Mentone, Muscoy, Rosina Ranch, Devore areas, as well as really every other unincorporated area in the county of San Bernardino that's part of our fire district. Next slide. Next slide. Talk a little bit about fire district operations. Often people confuse the fire department and think they only respond on fires. I think everybody at this point realizes that all of our units have paramedics. I mentioned that we're the second largest ambulance provider in the county, but we are the largest paramedic provider in the county. But besides that, we do a variety of different things that many fire departments don't do. When you're involved with the city fire department, you typically respond to fires and medical aids, but you're not doing a lot of rescues. County firefighters do that, especially in the city of San Bernardino with all the hazards that face us. We're used to responding on environmental disasters such as hazardous material spills. We're used to responding to forest fires that come into our houses. We're used to doing a variety of different high angle and tower rescues. And we certainly have our multi-casualty incidents that are sometimes caused by even terrorists. But there's a variety of activities that the county fire district responds to that a city fire doesn't. And it's often in the city of San Bernardino. Next slide. I'll talk about regulations. There's currently no federal or state regulations that dictate what level of service that a city or a county must provide to the residents. We do use the National Fire Protection Association NFPA 1710, which is the standard for current urban suburban areas, as a national standard. It's guidelines only, though. These are not adopted. And the response time for NFPA 1710 is that a unit, engine company, or ladder company will arrive on scene of a critical emergency within 4 minutes of the time of call receipt for a fire or an EMS dispatch. And then the remaining alarm units would respond within 8 minutes, 90% of the time. Next. Fires go through different phases, and it's very important that our firefighters get there within that 4 to 5 minutes in order to keep the fire in the room of origin and not spreading throughout the house. The city of San Bernardino has had a historic fire problem. We're actively working on preventing those fires in our district through a variety of different measures that I'd be happy to do another presentation on in the future. But I wanted to show the public the different phases of a fire that we're concerned with. The first thing, when a fire ignites, there's 1 to 2 minutes before anybody even notices. And then as somebody picks up the phone and calls 911, there's an alarm processing time. That's the length of that phone calls. They're talking to the dispatcher, and then the dispatcher goes ahead and notifies our firefighters to respond. So before the firefighters even leave the fire station, 3 to 4 minutes have gone by. The firefighters then have a travel time, as I pointed out in the NFPA 1710 in the previous slide. It's about 4 minutes is what we're looking for 90% of the time. That brings your total response to about 7 minutes. Currently, San Bernardino City has a very good fire protection. On average, you're about 6 minutes, 32 seconds. So you're right there where you should be with the current fire stations and fire equipment and the response to the individuals. Go to the next slide. NFPA 1710 does suggest some target measures, 2 of which I've already talked about, the top 2. But it also suggests that we have 4 firefighters at minimum on our fire engines. That's very rare in the county of San Bernardino. There's only 1 or 2 agencies that have that 4 firefighter minimum. And what that requires is that you have multiple fire apparatus on incidents, whether it's a fire or even sophisticated medical aids or high priority medical aids. Next slide. As I'm going through this presentation, there's going to be a couple of key terms that I want to mention. The first is distribution, and that's where are your fire stations that are currently located in the city? What's their geographical location, and then what's their concentration? Concentration means how close are they together, and that allows our firefighters and our fire engines to get to calls quickly in order to put the number of firefighters we need to mitigate an incident. The effective response force refers to how many firefighters we should have on a given incident. On a structure fire, NFPA 1710 suggests 15 to 17 firefighters on a single structure, and I'll show you that in another slide. Reliability is how reliable are we getting to the incident? We can build fire stations throughout the city, but if all those fire engines are tied up on calls, they're not going to have a good reliability of arriving in the allotted time. There's a risk identification that we're constantly looking at the risks facing our community, determining what those risks are, and then we're deciding how many firefighters do we need to mitigate those risks if they do occur. What is the expectations of the community, the risk expectation? And then what is the existing deployment for our city? Next slide. I presented to the council a couple of times on how we select fire station locations. This is an example using a computer program called DECAN. DECAN looks at the distribution and the concentration of the fire stations, and it looks at historical data as well as future predicted incidents and determines where's the best location to put fire apparatus and stations. This is important too, because if the city were to have a loss of FP5 funding, we would use this computer program to decide which stations remain staffed, but we would absolutely have to close fire stations. Next slide. This is an example of structure fire deployment. I mentioned it takes 15 to 17 firefighters to combat a structure fire, and here's why. When we arrive on scene, we'll have a crew, an engine crew of 3 individuals enter the house to start extinguishing that fire. Now, there's a variety of different federal and state, local mandates, laws that require that as firefighters are entering inside a house, we have to have firefighters outside ready to rescue the first responders. That's a law that we have to comply with. We also need individuals to stand by these fire apparatus and pump them. And in a world where we have a lot of autonomous machinery, fire engines aren't autonomous. We need that firefighter to be there to troubleshoot the machinery if it were to break down, to ensure that we have a water supply. Simply put, a failure of a fire engine could likely kill the firefighters who are fighting the fire inside the building. We also have a ventilation team. You'll often see them on the roofs of structure fires, and what they're doing is they're releasing those hot gases and smoke from the residents. They're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is better visibility for the firefighters as they try to find the seat or the base of that fire, but also if there's any victims in there, they want to make sure those victims are breathing fresh air until we can get to them. And then we also have 3 to 4 firefighters that are going in and they're rescuing victims. Doing a victim rescue is very, very common in San Bernardino City. It's something that our firefighters do on a regular basis. Next slide. So concentration, distribution, the number of firefighters, how reliable we are responding to emergencies, and effective response force are all affected by the loss of FP5. Now let me show you a macro view of that FP5 loss. San Bernardino City is part of the Valley Service Zone. That's the column on the left. And if you look at the blue column, it indicates there's 23 fire stations in the service area. There's 9 staffed fire stations in the city of San Bernardino and 1 on the airport for a total of 10. Without FP5, we would have to reduce 8 fire stations, close 8 fire stations. Next slide. This next slide shows how many fires or how many incidents are a firefighter responding on. Again, if we look at the valley, each firefighter is responding to 232 incidents per year. These incidents can take anywhere from an hour to an entire day to respond to. And that's just the incidents they're responding to. That doesn't include the other activities such as public education, public outreach, doing business inspections, doing the fuel mitigation, fuel modifications that we need to keep forest fires from entering our city. We have a lot of work there. Without FP5 funding, you'll see the gray bar next to it indicates the workload on our firefighters. It's significantly going to increase. I'm going to tell you something, and you're well aware of this. The city of San Bernardino has amongst the busiest firefighters in the United States. Over the last couple of years, we've ranked top 10 for the busiest engines, and I'm not worried about our guys responding to calls. They do a great job responding and putting out the fires. They work really, really hard. What I'm concerned with is as you start doing more and more calls, what are you not doing? The things that firefighters should be doing, going and visiting schools and teaching fire safety to our kids, going to our businesses and doing business inspection to prevent the fires, going into our foothills and doing the modifications of fuels and cutting fuel breaks and going to people's houses and demonstrating what a fire safe house looks like are some of the activities. Teaching CPR, going to the libraries and making sure the kids are good values and reinforcing reading habits, things like that. If you look to the columns, on the right side, you'll see Chino, Ontario, Rancho, Alpha Valley, and Colton. Those are city fire departments. And those city fire departments, the blue bar shows how many calls on average each of those cities are responding to. So Chino Valley firefighter on average respond to 88 incidents per year. Already our firefighters in San Bernardino area are responding to many times that. And without FP5 funding, it increases greatly. Next slide. This next slide shows the average response zones, and it's not a great representation of the response times and how they would increase in the city of San Bernardino. And the reason is the city of Fontana is under a contract. FP5 would not affect it. The city of Fontana has very robust fire protection. They have about twice the number of units per capita that the city of San Bernardino does. They have an excellent response time. So as FP5 is lost, it truly affects the city of San Bernardino a whole lot more than the minute and 5 seconds that's shown in this slide. This is also showing average. If the average response time is 4 minutes, 42 seconds, that may mean the response time is 0 if somebody came into a fire station. It may also mean that there was a response time of over 9 minutes. Together, they're averaged to 4 minutes, 42 seconds. We don't really like looking at averages. We like looking at the 90th percentile, or 90% of time, how well are we going to do at arriving on scene. Next slide. Wanted to show some of the staffing reductions, and this is broken down by service zone. A service zone, the Valley Service Zone, stretches from Upland all the way to Devore, and then all the way out to Mentone. And that's the staffing that's in that Valley Regional Service Zone. There's 321 currently staffed firefighters. With the loss of FP5, that would be reduced by about 80 firefighters, down to 249. The chart below shows the classifications that would be lost across the entire county. There would be a loss of 2 assistant chiefs. The assistant chiefs are the area fire chiefs. The battalion chiefs would be cut by about 9 battalion chiefs. Battalion chiefs are there to manage big incidents, the command and control. There would be a loss of almost 50 firefighters, a loss of almost 50 engineers, and a loss of almost 50 firefighters across the county. Next slide. So what does this truly mean for the city of San Bernardino? Now remember, I mentioned that San Bernardino is about 40% funded with FP5. So this truly means a loss of fire protection, a loss of staffed equipment, a loss of fire stations to the city. Next slide. The city of San Bernardino is in the West Valley Service Zone. The West Valley Service Zone concludes the city of San Bernardino and then the areas that I mentioned immediately surrounding it. Grand Terrace, Devore, Rosina Ranch, Mentone, and Muscoy are all included. Next slide. This is a picture of the geographical area. There's 14 full-time staff stations, 156 assigned suppression personnel. San Bernardino City has 9 stations, as I mentioned. And we have staffing at the International Airport. We have station at Grand Terrace, Devore, Mentone, and Muscoy, 1 each. Next slide. The city responds to an exorbitant amount of calls for service per year at 46,500. That is a huge number per capita compared to any city across the United States. And there's huge complexity. And I want to turn this over real quick to Chief Mejia to talk about some of the complexities as firefighters see every single year in the city of San Bernardino. Chief Mejia.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, I'm sorry. Dan Mejia, San Bernardino County Fire. I'm the Assistant Chief of Division 2. As Chief Muncy mentioned, one of our biggest concerns here too is our call for services. As Chief Muncy said, that we have one of the busiest engine companies per capita in the nation, and we're already seeing an uptick in calls from last year to this year. So we're already seeing an increase there. And then we talk about the severe wildland fire danger, areas like we see that are burning every year, Little Mountain, Paraseal, all the interface on the north end that creates some real challenges for us when you add wind to those. And it's just not the fire units that we get there, but it's all the specialized equipment that's required in those areas, the hand crews, the dozers, the participation with the sheriff's department with the helicopters. So those are challenges that we're still facing today. And in the homeless population, it's just not the medical aids, but we're seeing that the homeless are in some of the vacant buildings that we're going to, and it's requiring us to commit our firefighters inside those buildings to make sure that they're not occupied or nobody's in there. And so that's another challenge for us. Give you an example too. We just talk about San Bernardino City. It's probably one of our busiest areas as far as structure fires in the county for the areas that we serve. And in one of the slides, Chief Muncy shows how many firefighters it takes to combat a fire. Give you an example, a single family dwelling in San Bernardino City, we respond 4 engines, a truck, and a battalion chief. If we have a commercial fire, it's 5 engines, 2 trucks, and a battalion chief. So you can see the amount of resources it requires to take care of these incidents. And without FP5, you, as Chief Muncy will show, that you have an increase in response times, equipment that's available. So it creates a whole host of problems for the city. End of report.
Thank you, Chief Mejia. Next slide, please. That's really important that we put that many firefighters on a structure fire, commercial fire. It may seem like a lot, but again, we're required by state and federal laws to have a certain number of firefighters there to back up the firefighters that are going in. We have to have those firefighters in order to perform rescues. And we also have to have those firefighters to ensure that we're not allowing fire spread outside the area of origin, or at least the building of origin, because we don't want to burn down city blocks. There would be some service level reductions that we would need to look at for the city of San Bernardino. Very likely that would be the reduction of 3 engine companies and 1 squad, which would result in station closures. And then there would be an additional 4 staff stations in the San Bernardino area surrounding San Bernardino that would need to close. Next slide. Some enhanced service reductions. We do have a contract with SBIA at San Bernardino International Airport for aircraft rescue firefighting. This allows them to have an FAA index too, so they can receive commercial traffic. At County Fire pays a shared portion. We pay for 50%, they pay for 50%. The benefit for County Fire is we receive training officers that are able to train county firefighters. We also have firefighters that are able to respond in the immediate area right around that airport and on the airport. And they're also able to do special projects for us. We also provide paramedics for the San Bernardino Police Department underneath their SWAT program. That program would be threatened to be canceled. We wouldn't be able to provide the support that we do to San Bernardino PD. Next slide. There would be some effects in our administration and special operations. Now, the administration and special operations includes not only my office, but special operations is something that should be real concern to the city. That's our paid hand crews. That's our inmate hand crews. That's our helicopter programs. What our paid and inmate hand crews do are that they're the ones that actually go out and do the assessments of the community and do those fuel breaks to stop the spread of fire. They're actively out there thinning the forest around the city, especially in those urban interface. Those helicopter programs help us stop the fire and we want to keep the fires at 1 acre or less. 90% of the time, the helicopters and those hand crews allow us to do that. It would also affect our heavy equipment. Those are our bulldozers that we see. In addition, it affects our training division and our different types of training centers that we offer. Next slide. So this is our special operations division. As I mentioned, it's training and safety. Our emergency medical, which is our nurses. We're required by law to train our paramedics. We need to have quality assurance and quality improvement. We're looking at outcomes of our patients, and we're constantly looking to see how can we provide better emergency medical services, our paramedic services. And then our wildland section. Next slide. So a quick description of what these different sections are. Wildland division, they do a lot of that community risk reduction and fuel modifications. Our training division trains our recruits and provides our employees remedial and career development training. And then we have different specialty programs, our hazardous materials, our USAR, which is our urban search and rescue, our rescue folks, and our aircraft rescue firefighting. And then we have our EMS division. Next slide. Simply put, with fewer resources available and the consequent loss of 1/3 of our professional suppression staff, there would be a significant reduction in ability to provide these enhanced services. So all our fire departments currently have some specialty knowledge, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to keep your first responders trained to that specialty level. Often that's requirements from the state of California. There's health requirements, there's different testing that they might go through, and then obviously we want to keep their skills sharp, so we put them through different drills, often which are mandated. Without specialists to provide these skills, many events would be prolonged without resolution. I mentioned environmental disasters in the city of San Bernardino with the rail, with the heavy trucks that are going through on our freeways. A hazardous material spill would require us to arrive, to cordon off the area, and then call in a company to mitigate those incidents while the spill continues to occur. When we do that, we typically see incidents stretch from hours into days, and that's a major problem when you're shutting down rail or even the freeways surrounding our city. Next slide. There would be impacts to the fire marshal. Next slide. Now, the fire marshal works to make sure that our communities are safe through risk reduction. They also do the engineering and code enforcement programs. So they do all the plan checks for the city. They do a great job with the turnaround. They work very close with city staff to make sure that the contractors that come in and the different entities that want to have business operations in our city, their plans are taken care of real quick, and we're addressing any of their fire code concerns. Next slide. This is some of the services that they do. Some of these are by fees, such as fire planning and engineering. The fees that we charge supports that division, as well as the plan reviews. There's a lot of things here we don't have fees for. We don't have fees for the arson investigation program. That would be affected. We'd have to downsize that with an FP5 cut. Public educations to our schools, our community, and different outreach. That program would need to be cut, as well as our juvenile fire starter program. Juvenile fire starter program is trained individuals that act as counselors. We have kids, believe it or not, that start fires once in a while, and these counselors work with these kids to make sure that they're remediated. They realize that this may be exciting things to do, but this isn't the best thing to do to your neighborhood. Next slide. In total, there'd be a loss of about $2.7 million in revenues that affect the programs that I discussed previously. Next slide. Finally, there's some enhanced service impacts that I really want to emphasize across the county, but definitely affect our city. Next slide. Aircraft rescue firefighting. At SBIA, we wouldn't be able to maintain that FAA index that's required for the commercial traffic. We wouldn't be able to do the hazardous material responses to those environmental disasters that I spoke of, and we would see a reduction in our ability to respond to weather, fire, rescue, and EMS services. The city has one of the highest capacity, highest population based water rescues. We're constantly doing swift water rescues throughout the city for a variety of different reasons. That would be impacted. Next slide. We do have a technical rescue program with the Type 1 and 2 California State Certified Heavy Rescue. We formed them up in Regional Task Force 6. We received no revenue from the state. That program would need to be canceled. The water rescue, as I mentioned. And then the wilderness rescue in the areas immediately adjoining San Bernardino City, that would be affected. Next slide. There are some secondary, some kind of tertiary effects to service level. I'd like to go over those next. The first is a decrease in the Insurance Service Office, the ISO rating. ISO looks at the number of firefighters a city has. We rate City of San Bernardino separate from the rest of the county. You have a decent ISO rating with an ISO rating of 2 right now. We're working hard to get you to an ISO 1. And the reason why we want you to be at 1 is your insurance rates decrease. But as you lose firefighters and as you close, you're not able to staff your fire engines and you close your fire stations, your insurance rates, especially for businesses, increase. We decrease our ability to support other county departments around us, other city fire departments around us, and city departments within the city. It would decrease our large emergency incident funding. We need to have that fund so as big incidents occur, such as the Hillside Fire last year that burned down into the city, into our residents. As we respond to that, we need to hire equipment to come in to help us, and we need to pay firefighters overtime to work those incidents we wouldn't have the money that we need for those large incident funding, which would affect our ability to use as much aircraft as we do to keep the fires small. It would decrease our ability to use the heavy equipment. It would decrease our ability to put the amount of firefighters on an incident and would prolong those incidents that are occurring within the city. Mutual aid and automatic aid, what that means is that cities, fire departments around us, they want to assist us in our time of needs. And we want to assist them. So we'll send them a fire engine when they need help, and they'll send us a fire engine when they need help. But if you're unable to send fire engines because there's a decrease in the amount of fire equipment you have, then cities are less likely to want to send equipment to you to support you. The fact is the surrounding cities will not want to pay for fire protection that's not given to them in a reciprocal manner. It reduces our ability to respond to risk prior to events, do that community risk reduction, to decrease our public education, our fire prevention efforts, and finally decreases our ability to fund capital and apparatus replacement. Next slide.
That's it. That's slide 36.
Thank you very much. So the effects of losing FP5 affects the city of San Bernardino probably more than any other city in our jurisdiction due to the FP5 annexation. It is a 40% decrease in fire service for the city of San Bernardino. That affects you in many different ways besides just responding to calls. It affects our ability to stop the calls from occurring. So this is something I'm very, very concerned with. This will be on the November ballot as a repeal of FP5. It's repealing FP5 entirely across the county, and it affects the city annexation. Is there any questions from the council or city staff that I can answer at this time?
Dan, I really appreciate the presentation. This is, I think, the same, well, with a few differences. Yesterday, I heard it at the Board of, special meeting Board of Supervisors, and appreciate all the statistics and facts. It's a good refresher for our community to understand the importance of our fire protection district. Go ahead and open it up to council members for any quick comments. Yeah, Councilman Schreck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you very much for. I know you don't have a crystal ball. That's the pat answer. But what is the likelihood of the voters going against this? There's so many issues going on the ballot in November, including tax increases in taxes, decrease, all kinds of stuff going on. And I just wonder, and I understand that the group that got all the signatures to get this on the ballot may have some funding capabilities to run a campaign. Do we have any clue or any idea what the likelihood of FP5 being repealed? Have you done any studies on that or any polling or anything like that yet?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Charette, it's important for the fire district to remain neutral. We can't advocate for or against a tax measure. Certainly the city can express an opinion. So no, we're not in the position to do any polling. To hire a pollster, that would be something would be illegal for the fire district to do.
Okay.
I will point out though.
Go ahead.
I will point out that FP5 is a property assessment that the citizens of San Bernardino are already paying since 2016. So that may be something they want to continue to pay in order to receive the fire protection. But truly, this is it's up to the community on what level of fire protection they would like and desire for their community. That's not something that the fire district can weigh in on.
Okay, so that's the same case that we would be in if we were trying to pass some sort of revenue enhancement or whatever. We can only go out and maybe do an educational campaign on it. But in this case, we can actively, we as a city, and this maybe goes to legal or to city management, we can actively promote the idea that giving up or voting in favor of repealing FP5 would be a real detriment to the city of San Bernardino. And it would be really truly affected. And of course, we're getting ready to talk about budgets, so we're going to probably want to discuss at some point in time what our contingency plan is if that if that affects us. So is correct? We can do a campaign.
I would defer to your attorney for that.
Legal
Councilman,
or city management. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Nichol.
Yeah, now I understand FP5 includes unincorporated areas of the county. That's correct?
Yes, sir. It is the entire county fire protection district, which includes the city annexations such as San Bernardino.
Right.
As well
And now the property tax revenue that's generated in those unincorporated areas, does the same proportion of property tax revenue that is utilized for fire service in the city, the same proportion of that property tax revenue generated in other unincorporated areas of the county, is that same proportion of property tax revenue applied to fire service?
No, sir. Prop 13 dictates this, and it's very complicated. But as you're in the unincorporated areas, your property tax isn't going to a city. It's going entirely to the county.
And
Where
what
if you live in
portion
a
of
city,
property tax in San Bernardino is now going to the provision of fire service?
you have about $8 million in the city, just over, that's going towards fire service within the city's limits. So it's about 60% of our funding is coming from the property tax. During the FP5 annexation, the city kept a portion of that property tax to support the city and help it get out of the bankruptcy. And to make that up, FP5 was applied to make up the balance of what the city needed to fund in order to have a fire department that would be able to meet its needs.
So should the FP5 per parcel tax be repealed, would it be equitable to shut down or have a across the board cut in service throughout the district, or would San Bernardino be eligible to have some degree of additional service because of the fact that we allocate additional property tax revenue in addition to the parcel tax? I'm trying to understand how we equitably ensure that, obviously there will be across the board potential reductions in fire service, but is the city going to be subject to an across the board cut, or is there going to be an equitable reduction in fire service based on the amount of revenue that the city contributes from its property taxes related to those other areas of the county that don't allocate or don't have as much property tax allocated to fire service?
This is a very complicated policy discussion, and it's one that I hope that we don't have to have after November. There's a lot of factors that go into fire protection, and where do you decide your fire station should go? I showed you very, very quickly an analytical program that we use to look at station deployment and try to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people. When you look at San Bernardino, the property tax that's raised in San Bernardino will absolutely be spent in San Bernardino on fire protection. Any modeling you do, it's generally going to be the outlying areas that are going to be affected by this a little bit more than the concentrated urban areas. Now, with that said, there's still a large impact to the city of San Bernardino that would result in 7 fire engines would be predicted for the entire area, 3 at least from the city of San Bernardino. And right now you're already well past your maximum capacity for your fire engines. So part of that policy discussion, I'll talk a little bit about the future. We're really looking at some innovative approaches to ensure that our customers are receiving the right response when they call 911. You're not going to believe it. Sometimes people call 911 and they don't have a medical emergency or any kind of emergency. We're putting nurses in our dispatch center. We're asking questions now to determine the level of emergency. And some of those low acuity calls will be sent to a nurse that may simply tell the patient, you don't have a medical emergency, we're going to refer you to the 411 system. It may be using some sort of telemedicine. It may be referral to a doctor's or an urgent care, using Lyft, using Uber, using a medical van instead of responding to fire engine. That's the future of the fire service. But with that said, we're working on that program, and a loss of FP5 affects our ability to do that. If San Bernardino County were to put this program in place, we would be amongst the first in the nation to actually have this program. Everybody else is on track to do it in the next 5 to 10 years. It's something that we truly need to do to meet our service model today, let alone if there was an FP5 loss, then it would severely impact our ability to provide that superior service to our customers without always sending a fire engine code 3 with an ambulance.
Now, I just wanted to also just one last question here. Now, and I share my colleague, Councilmember Charrette's concern. My understanding, and I've heard very similar information, is that there is a significant amount of money that will potentially be going into this repeal campaign. And I know you can't get into the political dimension of this, but I'm trying to understand if and when should that FP5, because we as policymakers need to hope for the best but plan for the worst. Should we lose the FP5 per parcel tax? Is there a mechanism, and perhaps our legal counsel or city manager can chime in, that we could either rapidly reestablish that or provide voters a mechanism to opt in back into a fire district? Or do we have to wait another 2 years since it's a tax? What immediate mechanisms might be available to us specifically as a city to ensure that we can maintain fire service? Because I am concerned about the loss of fire service in the city, and that we need to have some mechanism to hopefully immediately provide the revenues needed to support sustained fire service. So maybe our legal counsel, we're in court, sort of our city in particular is in sort of a bad position should this be repealed. And I just want to make sure that we understand what options may be available to us should it be repealed, for us to quickly correct that and perhaps opt into a new district, or what options might be available to us.
Yeah, I wasn't personally involved in your restructuring following your filing of bankruptcy. I do understand that you were in a very unique situation with respect to how you chose to finance your fire service through this district by joining the district. I think that there could be some ways for you to explore how you could raise revenue as a city to pay for your services, whether that's a substitute public safety tax, requires 2/3 votes, or some type of assessment district. I think if you would like, I could work closely with your city manager.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a way to put a conditional measure on the ballot, tax measure, that says if this tax is repealed, we vote to put this tax back in place so that we don't lose that fire service.
Yeah, you
I don't know
potentially-
if there's a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, we can look at that. I'd certainly be happy to work with the city manager and get you those options. I think you also have to look at that in the context of other tax measures and revenue alternatives that you're seeking. And you may want to do some research on how that might impact your other efforts as well.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Nickel. This is a presentation. We appreciate our staff. We do have other items. Any last final questions or comments? Let's keep them brief, please. We want to continue on with our calendar tonight. Councilmember Barra.
Yes, slide page 15. I don't know if you want to bring it back up. I don't have the actual document on me. Are we considered part of the Valley then? I know you said there was a Valley District 2 and.
Yes, you are. So you're in the Valley Service Zone in Division 2. So the Valley Service Zones from Upland all the way to Devore and then out to Mentone. You're in Division 2, which includes San Bernardino and the surrounding communities. So in the Valley area, that's how many calls per firefighters that you currently see in blue.
Correct.
And with the loss of 5, you can see the increase to the amount of calls per firefighter in the service zone.
Do you have a number that's specifically just for our city as far as these calls go?
Chief Mejia can provide you with that number, and I will have him do so. It's much higher. What you see there is the average, and in San Bernardino City, it's much higher than what you see right there.
Okay, so this is an average. This is not the actual calls.
Okay. That is the average per firefighter in the zone, and As I mentioned, Fontana is also in the zone, and it kind of skews our Valley Service Zone numbers. Now, what the Valley Service Zone is, the money raised in the Valley Service Zone has to be spent in the Service Zone. I mentioned the property tax in San Bernardino is absolutely spent in the city of San Bernardino to provide for fire protection, as is at P5.
Okay, that was my only question. Other than that, thank you for your presentation, Chief.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chief Muncy, Chief Mejia. We appreciate you and we thank you. Yeah, a wonderful evening and thank you for presenting.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to our public comments portion for tonight. Miss City Clerk, if you would, please.
Okay, so the written comments were provided to you via email prior to the meeting, and they are available on the city's website for the public. We have 9 voice recordings that were received for tonight's meeting. However, 2 were submitted by the same person, Andrea Vidalre, and only 1 will be played since there's a limit of 1 public comment per open session at 3 minutes, okay?
Fourth Ward, 3 with a problem, and the problem is last week while driving east on 9th Street between E and Waterman, the south side of 9th Street was a humongous dumping for major pieces of trash. Unbelievable. Don't know how long it had been there. The problem that I have, and I'm sure there are other pockets, so want to share with you a solution to hire our youth, the ones who just graduated and the ones who are still in school, so that they can not only beautify our city, but it would give them a chance to find a job. My other request is, as you continue to look for people to work in this city, it would be helpful if you hired those who are qualified and live in San Bernardino to be in some of the positions that you will have available. And if we do that, we will see a better city, a better place to live. And remember, our youth used to clean up this city. It was called the Savita program, but we found a way to get rid of them. Maybe we should bring them back. Thank you for listening. Hi, my name is Andrea Vidalre. I'm with the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. This comment is for the consent calendar, specifically the consent calendar item where you will be talking about approving the demolition, construction, and maintenance of the Mount Vernon / BNSF bridge that lies on the west side of San Bernardino. This is on the consent calendar, which means that we're not going to be able to comment on it. My request is that you pull this item so that public comment can be made on it at a later time. I don't understand how something of this size is just going to go forward without comments from the public. And I specifically asked this from a public health standpoint. The west side of San Bernardino specifically was designated by the state as an AB 617 community. That bill designated 10 cities with the worst air pollution to be given money for monitoring and given money for an investment in a clean air plan to try to improve the air quality in that region, because there's an understanding and knowledge that so many people in that community are suffering from the impacts of the air pollution in that area. As you know, the BNSF and the 215 area are highly concentrated with pollution and highly concentrated, sadly, with many people that are dealing with those impacts. So if you move forward in approving the demolition, construction, and maintenance of this bridge, you'll be essentially putting these people that are already at risk in further risk. And this goes against some of the plans that have been made out in the AB 617 community in trying to improve the air quality in that region. So we asked if that could be pulled from the consent calendar and spoken about at a later date
we believe that this is not the appropriate move to make right now, and can be put off to a later time, possibly after COVID, where we can talk about what mitigation measures are actually going to be taken. If we go forward with limited knowledge of the mitigation that's going to be taken for this demolition, you are going to be plaguing that entire side with negligence on your behalf, with the dust that's going to come from that area. As you know, COVID-19 is a respiratory virus. This attacks people that already have deficiencies in their respiratory system, which is in such a high concentration on the west side of San Bernardino by this bridge. And that can be shown to you by multiple studies done by Loma Linda and the University of Southern California, which you all should be very aware of. To caution us moving forward in this and ask that you all take it out of the consent calendar. Thank you. Hello, council member, San Bernardino City Council and Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Maribel Nunez with California Partnership. We are a regional economic justice coalition, and we serve in the area of San Bernardino. We represent over 30 organizations in that area. And we wanted to submit a public comment for today's city council meeting. It's not an agenda item. That's not a city council meeting today. But we know the COVID-19 would be a topic that you'll be bringing up. And what we want to ask is that we're in the midst of a public health emergency and economic recession. And we're asking our community to stay home, essential, trips and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people that are unemployed as well as a result of not all the businesses opening. And so we ask that the San Bernardino City Council consider the new community development block grants that are COVID-19 CARES related to consider rent relief for residential and if there's enough funds for commercial tenants. We ask that you consider that. And then also, if you don't have any, put together a 6-month repayment plan as well, and really protections against 3-day notices for non-payment. Because even though some of the notices could be formal or informal, it's going to really scare a lot of our community members. And again, a goal is to get them inside. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
This is Christian Vargas. I am a 20-year resident of the city of San Bernardino. I have been following the politics for about 3 years now. This is my first time speaking public comment. I have been following and doing my own investigations about everything the city has came across to date. This is more towards John Valdivia, Juan Figueroa, Henry Nickel, Christine Richard. You guys are jokes, to be honest. You guys are pathetic. You guys do not know how to manage anything. I don't see how you guys can have regular jobs before being on the council. Yeah, people elected you guys, sadly. But if it was based on the qualifications, I highly doubt it. You guys just pure luck, I should say. But come re-election, come the results of the investigation for John Valdivia, you're as good as gone. And all your little friends and your little puppets and your little whole posse, gone. And I'm pretty sure you'll do some jail time. I'm pretty sure you can make bail, being that, we pay you mile reimbursement by the 1,000, which is ridiculous. So with that being said, do you guys have any plans for anything, really? Okay, woohoo, Amazon's coming to the airport. Okay, we already knew that. But what are the plans for that? What is that budget going to reflect? Anything that benefits anybody, or just you guys and your special interest? Thank you.
This is the public comment for Treasurer Ortiz, open session. So council, as we go into this open session, I'm looking over the agenda And I get it. Terry LeDuc is absolutely unqualified as a city manager. And the majority of you put her in that position because you are just as equally allegiant to Valdivius. But in all of that, do you guys ever stop to look at the financial impact that you place on the residents because of the lack of qualification that each of you hold? You're going to look at approving a PO tonight for used cars for the police department at $115,000 when we are facing almost $10 to $15 million of deficit in the next month. You know what? Let them do with what they have. Why are we purchasing more vehicles? You approved a purchase order last year. Most of our residents can't even afford to pay their rent, and here we are buying new vehicles. It's utterly irresponsible and wrong, and a slap in the face of those who are struggling. PD is 80% of our budget. Any department that's over 65% is a drain and unsustainable. You are going to cause us to have to outsource PD because you refuse to just say, no, we can't afford it. We can't do it. You're about to spend $80,000 on an investigation for the mayor when you already know for a fact what he's done. And none of you refuse to call it out, to say what it is. It's not enough to get down and make a lame public comment about if it's true, then step down. When you were already chatting about it with the community, how you were warning him about his actions, about how some of you bore the brunt of it publicly, Fred and Jim and Terry. And yet you guys act now like none of this happened, but we'll continue to pay for it. We'll go to court, and the taxpayers who suffer, who will lose their services, who will watch employees be laid off or put aside, while you guys sit and do nothing because you're complacent. What happens in the city of San Bernardino isn't normal. Most cities are not failing. Most cities are preparing, forecasting, developing plans, but not you guys. You sit there and roll your eyes, or shake your heads, or turn off your cameras because you don't know what you're doing, but it's still affecting us. There has to be more to the future of our city because while you may not want to take responsibility for what's see, you take responsibility for what is happening now.
Yes, good evening, Council. Paige Miller here, calling regarding 3 issues. Number 1, fireworks. It would be great at the end of the meeting this evening to have a council member make a motion to have a verbal update on fireworks at the meeting on July 15th. That is the first council meeting after July 4th this year. Request the fire chief and police chief to give an update, including the violations, arrests, monies collected, so you have a better handle on where this issue is. At that meeting, perhaps it is time then to make a motion to require that the fireworks are banned. You have the issue of above 30th Street, of below 30th Street. No one pays attention to that. Between the fireworks and gun shots going off, it is, extremely hard on our first responders as well, as the community. Number 2, homeless. There was a point in time count early in the year. It would be great to have an update to the council. What has been working, what has failed, and what has been productive. How many homeless have actually been moved into hotels or resources to place into some kind of employment. Find out what is actually working. There are some communities right now surrounding San Bernardino that are trying to get them off the streets. You don't want anyone giving a one-way bus ticket to San Bernardino to additional homeless. There are some tents that have been starting to set up in Paris Hill, so you really need to have a verbal update on this issue. And number 3, the animal shelter. Thank you to the city manager for providing the update on the physical improvements. It sounds as if a new director is not moving forward at this time
would like to propose maybe considering, once again, the unsolicited proposal from the San Bernardino Animal Care Foundation, making the upland shelter a prototype. Also want to thank all the rescue groups during this pandemic that have done such a superb job doing one-on-one counseling and adoptions. You have really helped bring the numbers down for those that are out there, the homeless animals. So thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Please allow small businesses to open soon or they will not survive. Please open small businesses, allow small businesses to open or they will not survive. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Alden Grady, San Bernardino resident. Good evening, council members. This call is regarding agenda item 3, 4, and 5. Agenda item 3 is regarding the sale of the Arden and Guthrie lot. In 2006, this was acquired by the city of San Bernardino, and according to the documents, the total cost that the city would have paid is over $13 million. The sale agreement that is on the agenda is less than half, which means that taxpayers would then have lost, because this would put the city in a negative, would have lost more than 50% of its value. And I remind you that properties have not decreased in value, but have actually increased even here in San Bernardino. That location is centralized, where it's close enough to residents from Highland and to service San Bernardino. It also has great freeway access. Please do not sell this at such low price. Number 4, the agreement of the Veneer Tower building. I would highly recommend that you engage in conversation to be able to relocate somewhere with San Bernardino City Unified. They acquired the property, which was the old Sun building, and there's plenty of space there. You can engage in an agreement that would house everyone until something is resolved with our own city hall. That would save the city hundreds of thousands of dollars. And right now, due to the COVID closures, I think that our city would greatly benefit from canceling the Veneer Tower. Excuse me, not canceling since it's already expired, but not engaging in a new contract with the Veneer Tower. Number 5, the purchase of orders of the unmarked police vehicles. I see no reason to, again, have this year in 2020 purchase more undercover vehicles when you already took care of that last year. Last year, you agreed to purchase not only patrol vehicles, but you also agreed to pay for undercover units. And I remind you that none of this, the purchase of the police vehicles, the undercover vehicles, nor the promotions, fell within the police service 5-year resource plan. This is all taken away from what was supposed to get San Bernardino out of bankruptcy. This is not the time, because it's not just the purchase of undercover vehicles, it's also going to be the maintenance. Thank you for your time. Before I forget, I would like to know if
That is where her message ended, and that's the end of the recorded messages.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move into our staff reports.
No,
Tonight is
I have a comment.
Yeah, and I have a request from a constituent quickly for Ms. Rocha.
Okay, is it a public comment, Mr. Nickel?
Yeah, it's a public comment
Okay, go
related
ahead.
item. They just wanted a reiteration of where to find the public comments on the website, the written public comments. Where do they go on the website to review those? Is that on the city clerk's page?
It's actually on the cover page of the agenda, and it says items that are submitted to be part of the meeting record can be found using the link below, and select the current year and meeting date.
And then the actual written public comments, are those part of the record that is available online?
Yes.
And where do they obtain that? That's the question they have. Where can they obtain the copies of those written public comments?
On the city's website, and the link is provided on the cover page of the agenda.
On the cover page. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jim.
A comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Keep it
and
short,
it deals with agenda item number 5. It's from Mr. Cliff Cummings. He writes, thanks to the City Council for reconsidering the purchase of certain vehicles from vendors inside the city as opposed to going outside. It is actually the second time this has happened that I am aware of. The first occurrence was several years ago, and I was notified after the fact. As businesses reopen, and sadly some are likely to be closed forever, I am somewhat stunned that whomever is in charge of this duty failed to understand the impact financially and psychologically that this would have on the locals who have invested in San Bernardino. My businesses are doing very well, and as such, I am taking my entities out of the purchase process in favor of the others who need the sales to keep their people employed. As usual, I would have sold the vehicles at wholesale to the city as a thank you for keeping local businesses as a top priority. On a more positive note, our new Toyota facility in the south part of the city is moving along well and will be followed by a new Subaru building. And then a third unnamed franchise will follow immediately. The net investment of this will be in excess of $70 million over the next 3 years. Clearly, I have confidence in the future of San Bernardino and am looking forward to helping recreate the business and atmosphere the city needs. Thanks for working to keep San Bernardino strong. Best regards, Cliff Cummings, San Bernardino Toyota.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mulvihill. Let's move on to our staff reports for tonight. It's item number 3, purchase and the sale agreement with Mark Development. Ms. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Huntley is going to give this presentation.
Thank you, Terry. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this item is coming before you in association with the purchase and sales agreement between the City of San Bernardino and Mark Development. What I'd like to do is actually provide a little bit of background over a long period of time. This site, the former redevelopment agency in the city has been working on spinning it off and having the property developed for probably about 15 years. I think it's important for us to cover some of the background history of it, to know where we were, where we're at today, and why we're doing what we're doing. But so prior to 2005, I do want to indicate that this property, and the property in question is Arden Guthrie. It's on the southwest corner of Arden and Highland Avenue. Back in the early 2000s, there were a lot of problems in that immediate area in what we call the Arden Guthrie neighborhood. There are problems with substandard housing. There's some problems with gangs, problems with crime, and a lot of other significant issues specifically related to the property in question. The property we're looking at is about 17.4 acres. So because of those conditions, the city, as well as the redevelopment agency, submitted an application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for a Section 108 loan. In 2005, the city was informed that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development was going to award that $7.5 million to the city of San Bernardino as CDBG funds. And then what the city would be doing is then it would be providing an agreement with the redevelopment agency to utilize those funds specifically to alleviate the problems in the neighborhood that I've already mentioned. But it also allowed for land acquisition of parts of that site. It allowed for the relocation of some of the residents within the complex, also allowed for the demolition of the existing units and removal of a lot of the backbone infrastructure. So that started the process. On around 2005, the city did engage Home Depot as well as Mark Development to evaluate the possibility of building a commercial center on the property, which is really what the intent of the redevelopment agency was. Purchase it, clean it up, and then bring in a commercial development for that property. So with that, in 2006, the city did enter into an exclusive right to negotiate with Mark Development. The city did receive the $7.5 million in about 2007. And then from 2007 to 2010, the agency staff took the appropriate actions to do everything that I've mentioned before. That's the land acquisition, the consolidation of the parcels, the demolition, relocation, the whole spiel. So by 2010, the developer was working with the redevelopment agency that at that time entered into a second exclusive right to negotiate for the property. The developer, Mark Development, and Home Depot had put together a conceptual plan that was reviewed by the redevelopment agency, at which point the developer was told to proceed with the entitlements on the property. So from 2010 till about 2012, the developer put together a packet, submitted the entitlements to the city. We were in the process of processing it. It went through the Planning Commission, and then what happened in 2012? A number of things happened to the city in 2012. First and foremost, which really impacted the property, was the state of California, in their infinite wisdom, decided to wipe out redevelopment statewide. And what did that force all redevelopment agencies to do? Any programs or properties or deals agencies were working on had to be put on hold until we worked through the new legislation created by the state, figured out what needed to get done, and then proceed with creating a long-range property management plan for all of those specific assets that we held. One of those happened to be the Arden Guthrie property. Now, I do want to point out the applicant did proceed with the entitlements, and toward the end of 2012, they did receive approval by the city council for all their entitlements, and council did approve the environmental impact report to allow development on the property. However, an additional 5 years went on till about 2017, when the city finally got authorization to be able to utilize and actually spin off the Arden Guthrie property again. The agency, again, for the third time, entered into an ERNA with Mark Development. The unfortunate part is, due to the change in the commercial real estate market, it really changed how business does business, and a lot of the big box retailers like Home Depot were not moving forward. And as such, Mark Development was the single entity which wished to proceed with ERNA with the city at that point. But again, at no fault of the city, no fault of the applicant, it took 5 years to get back to the point where we were in negotiations with them. So from the middle of 2017 till the end of 2018, the successor agency staff and the developer worked together. They put together a conceptual plan, somewhat different than the original plan in 2012. At which point, in December of 2018, their ERNA expired, and they requested to go back to council. If council does remember, in January of 2019, there was a closed session item, and council gave staff authorization to proceed with finalizing negotiations. So in the middle of 2019, the city did their appraisal, the values included within the staff report, and the city's appraisal prepared by CBRE was $4,950,000. The developer hired a separate appraiser, Mission Property Advisors. They did their appraisal, and their appraisal came out to $3,535. We had additional discussions with them to include our legal counsel, who deals with real property disposition. We came to the understanding that really the fair market value is somewhere between the applicant's appraised value of $3,535,000 and the city's appraised value of $4,950,000. We had discussions with the applicant on this. We even brought it to council in closed session. We expressed what the middle ground was. Council gave us direction to proceed, which is why we're here tonight. So really at this point, we're presenting you with the purchase and sales agreement and joint escrow instructions between you as the successor agency and Mark Development. In addition to the purchase and sales agreement, I do want to make it clear, and we've had discussions in the past about the Section 108 loan. And because the Section 108 loan was used for this particular property, the city and the purchaser of the property will have an obligation to comply with the terms, and that's to meet the national objective to produce affordable jobs, or jobs for low to moderate income individuals. I do want to point out, by the sales of this property, again, the RDA and then the successor agency have been working at this property for about 15 years now. With that, this would allow the property to be sold, and then at that point, a regional commercial center will be built, and we'll realize new sales tax coming to the city. I also want to point out, and this is really critical, I know council brought this up in a previous meeting too, but What does that mean for the Section 108 loan? Well, today we currently owe about $3,774,000 on that loan. By us closing escrow on it at some point in the future, that'll open up the ability where we will then be able to capture about $770,000 annually of CDBG funds to be able to put back into the budget and use that for critical capital improvements within the city of San Bernardino. So with that said, I would like to share with you some of the next steps, because I think that's pretty critical also, just because it deals with, give me a second here, let me get my notes, because it's not only the successor agency that will need to approve this, but it's also 2 other outside agencies. So if council opts to approve this tonight, we have already scheduled it for the June 11th County Oversight Board meeting. And then as soon as that gets approved, it'll get forwarded up to the State Department of Finance. They are given 100 days to review this deal, and they will take every single day of that 100 days. And then once they give us approval, then it comes back to us. And at that point, the developer, Mark Development, will proceed with updating their entitlements for the site. The reason why they need to update their entitlements, the entitlements were approved in 2012 under different market conditions. Not only did the Great Recession impact us, but I guarantee this pandemic is also going to affect how we do business too. So their intent would be to amend their entitlement, which includes updating and amending the EIR for the project. That'll go through the Planning Commission, but it will come back before the City Council for your final decision on the development plans. And then based on that, we are able to move forward and close escrow on the property. And then at that point, what the city's obligation is to make sure we monitor the project and make sure that they meet the national objective for producing jobs for low to moderate income individuals. Well, that's kind of a long presentation, but I think there's some critical information you should know. And really, it's 15 years worth of history. So with that, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Huntley. So the question before council really is a yes or no on the purchase price. You have it in your backup. And so the resolution is, or staff recommendation is as stated there in your backup material. Is there a motion for approval on the staff recommendation?
Hello.
Councilman Mulvihill, is there a second?
I'll second, but I have some questions.
Councilman,
questions too.
Question on seconds. Yes, sir. Mr. Nickel?
So just real quickly, Mr. Huntley, so what obligation exists up until the point where this property is actually developed and those jobs are created? So in other words, the city is still responsible for that 108 loan until we've created those jobs, until the site is sold, until the construction is completed. How does that work? Kind of walk me through when are we off the hook for the 108 and for the obligation for that loan?
Just to share a little bit with council, just because we provide federal funds to individuals, nonprofits, development entities, the city is always obligated to ensure the funds are used appropriately and per the national objective. So until the development entity ensures and creates those jobs, we are still on the hook.
So we will not receive that additional CDBG money until the 200 or so individuals are actually employed, or when?
No,
when
we'll
do we
start receiving. We will start. So the way it currently works right now is that we have a Section 108 loan, and we make payments based on the payment schedule annually. And what we're doing right now is that every year we use a portion of our CDBG allocation to pay down that loan. As soon as we close escrow, then at that point, once we get the sales proceeds, we'll pay off the Section 108 loan. We'll no longer have to pay that, and that additional funding will be able to plug into improvements or programs within the city. Right.
Now, is our entire CDBG program in jeopardy if those jobs are not created?
Currently, no. So we're just dealing with the amount that was specifically related to the project site. That's the $7.5 million. Staff has had, since I've come on board, we've had many conversations with the LA HUD office, and with their concern is they want to see production. And what I'll share with you, there's another item on tonight's agenda that talks about the Section 108 loan. I'll get more into that then. But
yeah, and I guess my biggest concern is I share your understanding. COVID could change the dynamic significantly for the next probably 2 or 3 years. Retail may never quite be the same. Hotels may not be operating quite the same. Restaurants may not be operating quite the same for quite a long time. And if that's the case, and we've put our CDBG on the line, and we don't produce those jobs as quickly as we may hope, what does that do to our overall CDBG program? I'm just trying to understand this because, we're in some pretty significant economic circumstances and a downturn, and obviously that may have an effect. And I just want to understand all the dimensions of this deal and how, if there might be some delay or some inability to perform completely given economic conditions, what impact does that have on our overall CDBG operations?
Yeah, I think those are some really good questions and good points. So what I can share with you is what dialogue we've had with HUD. And generally speaking, it's not going to affect our annual allocation, but what is at risk is that 7.5 million. And if we don't produce those jobs at some point in the future, then potentially it's a 7.5 plus any interest associated with that. Now, the city manager has been in the meetings with me also talking to HUD, and really at the end of the day, they could claw back the 7.5 million and interest on that. So in regards to the other CDBG funds, I think would still be allocated that component. As you're aware, our housing division's been spending probably the last 18 months to 2 years cleaning up past practice, and our relationship with HUD has improved. Again, these are good questions. We can also reach
I just want to make sure we've got a very good relationship with HUD and that we're monitoring this, because I don't want to come back a couple of years from now and say, well, we couldn't perform, we can't perform, and now we got to pay all this money back to HUD. I want to make sure we're working as closely as we can to find ways that we can accommodate the reality that we're facing now and probably will be for the near future. And hopefully HUD can work with us, and hopefully we can work with our local congressional representative to make sure that we aren't put in jeopardy because of something we really have no control over.
Sure, makes sense. And even and I'll share with you that we had no control over the state of California wiping out redevelopment either, and it delayed it for 5 years, right? But really, I'm not going to say HUD didn't care, but I mean, to them, they have the national objectives. And if a product doesn't comply, they have DC coming down on the local office. And what we've done is we've started to build that relationship with the LA HUD office. I think it's much better than it was. And with this one, as we get into the other item we have on the Section 108 loan, I'll go into more of the discussion why we're doing a substantial amendment and some of the expectations that the LA HUD office is asking of us. So,
okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second by Councilman Nickel. And yes, Councilmember Ibarra.
I actually had a lot of questions. Most of them have been answered by Mr. Huntley. Thank you so much for answering. Now, regarding the order of how we do these things, right now, the sale is pending final approval from the countywide board and the oversight board and the Department of Finance.
Correct.
And I had asked you that question, what are the chances of that being rejected, the sale agreement, and you didn't respond. You responded that it is highly unlikely that they will deny the sale. Now, having said that, is it possible that we go ahead, or how will it affect us if we do the sale while this is being cleared up by the CWOB and the DOF? Because it's asking us to wait until March 31st if they don't close escrow in order to increase the amount. Can we go ahead and go and move forward with the sale, and that could help us pay off the loan in the meantime? Or if we are going to be waiting for the Department of Finance and the countywide oversight board, should we then give them another exclusive agreement? negotiating agreement like they had before, or will that be a waste of time? I want to hear from you with the feedback you're getting from HUD.
Sure. Well, dealing with the process itself, you know, the Dissolution Act set up a specific process that we have to follow. It's basically the law. So we cannot legally liquidate or sell any property assets until after it goes to the County Oversight Board and then to the State Department of Finance. So it has to go through the process with the sales of any of our property assets. And then you asked, I'm sorry, the follow-up question was?
If we should be at this point, giving them another exclusive contract, that they're going to be the only ones, because I've had other entities asking me, having interest in the Art and Guthrie project, and I understand Mark Development, they've gone through so much hurdles already. I'd like to see this project develop. It is prime real estate in our city. It is vacant right now. There's homeless encampments setting up there as well. Should we proceed with giving them the exclusive agreement again, since it expired in November 2018?
Well, basically what council's doing is you're going to be executing a resolution solidifying the fact that you will be selling this property to them. So there's no need at this point to go back and do an ERNA. What ERNA really is supposed to do is when we're first putting a piece of property out, it gives a specific development entity the opportunity to work exclusively with a city, and we can't take any offers from anyone else, and work through the deal points and everything. As it comes to this, we've been there, we've done that. This has been going on for a long time. So there's really no need for that. The resolution for the sale actually solidifies our commitment to them to sell the property.
Okay, and then lastly, you're saying June 11th, they have a meeting with the countywide oversight board, right?
Correct.
And then from there, how soon will it be going to the State Department of Finance?
Sandra, that's in the backup. It's about a 100-day process. He's gone.
It's 100 days with the DOF, but from June 11th to when the DOF gets it and they have their 100 days, is there a gap in between? How many additional days between both, or are they both being done at the same time?
So as soon as it goes to the June 11th meeting, the oversight board staff is really good about turning it around. So I would probably think within that week, we will get the approved resolution, everything we need from them. And then that'll be shipped up to the state, and the state will, I say will, use all 100 days to review this before they give us the thumbs up.
Okay. So is it okay then if we make a slight change though? I'm not comfortable with approving it with the closing escrow before March 31st of next year. Can we bump up that date to maybe November or December of this year?
Well, we actually originally that's what the agreement said, which was December. That was a discussion we had with HUD. HUD wanted to see production, period. With that said, the reason why it was pushed out to the end of the first quarter of next year is because of the pandemic. We need to be fair and reasonable and give them opportunities to amend their entitlement. So it's really a fair and reasonable time for them to do the amendments and come back to us. So we actually bumped it out from the end of December of 2020 to the end of March of 2021.
Okay.
Yes, I want to see a sooner date.
Council member. All right. We've had some discussion. Any final thoughts? If not, let's call the roll. Members would cast their votes. Ms. City Clerk.
Okay. Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Yes.
Councilmember Charette.
I support.
Councilmember Nickel.
Yes.
Councilmember Richard is absent. And Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
Okay, very good. We look forward to partnering with Mark Development. This is I think this is a great deal. We get the Section 108 loan paid off. We get a deal with Mark Development. It's taken some time. There's been a lot of hiccups. We're looking forward to the partnership, and I think this is going to be good for our retail industry eventually when it comes back. This will come back in many reiterations to the council, so we'll have that opportunity. I appreciate.
Mr. Mayor, just really quick, just a point of order. Was there even a motion? Can I get a clarification on who made the motion, who seconded? I don't know if that actually.
Councilman Mulvihill, according to my records, and Councilman Nichols.
Okay.
Is that right, Ms. City Clerk?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we appreciate the city council on this. This is light of COVID and whatnot. Thank you, Mr. Huntley, for that. Moving on to item number 4, the lease extension agreement of Veneer Tower Building. Ms. City Manager.
Chris Jensen, our Public Works Director, is going to give this report.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are we on? Okay, good. Happy National Public Works Week. Let me just start with that. So the item before you is the consideration of a 12-month extension to our lease agreement at the Veneer Tower. As you're all aware, the original agreement was for 2 years and had 2 6-month extensions on it that were exercised by the mayor and city council and city manager back in 2019. Those extensions expired as of April 15th, 2020. Staff has been working with a representative of the Veneer Tower in addition to trying to take a look at other places that we might be able to find as a more permanent home for ourselves. And as we worked through not only trying to get through those negotiations and all the other things going on right now, COVID included, we were unable to come to an agreement that we felt that was super favorable to the city. So at this point, we spoke with the legal team, and we think that our best option is to extend the current lease for another year to give us the opportunity to continue either the negotiations with Veneer Tower or to explore other options. The changes that you'll see in the agreement or the amendment to the agreement, I apologize, while there is a slight increase in the monthly rent amount, that is not due to an increase in cost per square foot. We actually had a reduction in the amount that we're being charged per square foot. What we did see, though, is that there was kind of a true up that was done in terms of the square footage and the rentable space. My understanding is when the original agreement was done, there was some square footage that was taken off of another agreement or understanding. And so as we moved through this, we really made sure that we took a look at what square footages we had on the various floors. As you know, we currently occupy the first floor for our information center, the third floor where we've got the city manager's office, human resources, finance, and then the 8th floor for the mayor and city council. So the question for you tonight, the recommendation is to approve to move forward with the lease extension for that short period of 12 months to allow us to kind of continue to figure out how we're going to get through the next year and how we can come up with a plan to really find kind of that permanent home for City Hall. So I don't know.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. We appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation. There's a motion for approval of staff by Fred Charette with a second by anybody?
Substitute motion.
There's a second on Councilman Charette.
He made the motion.
Motion for approval from staff from Fred.
From Mulvihill.
Jim, is that a second?
Motion, though.
Yeah, that's a second.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ibarra, you're recognized.
Yes. So if we look at page 312, it's showing the agreement. Can somebody explain the holdover? Just so we're all on the same page. I'm understanding that right now, since we already satisfied the lease, we are on a month-to-month basis, and we have to give no less than 60-day prior written notice should we decide to move somewhere else or veneer terminate our tenancy here, what is the difference between the holding, doing the month-to-month to the year lease? I believe it's 110% increase, which we already have. And I know not all of us come to the 8th floor, and we're trying to condense and bring down our expenses for the city, especially City Hall, since we can't go back in there. So I'm trying to understand the holding over that's mentioned on page 312 versus the 1-year lease. If someone can explain that for me.
So I will take a stab at this, and then also defer to legal. Sonia can interrupt me at any time. But my understanding of the holdover, Councilmember Ibarra, is that while yes, we can stay in the building on that month-to-month lease, or I'm sorry, on the month-to-month term situation, we also run the risk of Vanner being able to give us a 60-day notice to exit the building, and we aren't prepared at this point. We haven't identified another facility that would not need additional repairs, or that we already own, that would have the capacity to house the staffing that we have in that facility now. So the holdover truly is a month-to-month. The 12-month lease just gives us a little bit more protection in terms of not having, I think, the Vanner agency decide that they are going to want to rent that space to someone else during the 12-month period.
Is there a possibility that I personally work in an office building, and I know leasing office space, it's something hard for a lot of property owners, you know. Do you really think, honestly, that Veneer is going to want to send us off? I mean, if let's say they do find a tenant, are they going to be able to find a tenant that's going to take all 3 floors so that we have to leave? I honestly, I don't think it's necessary to do the 1-year lease. I would like to just stay as a month-to-month. So let's say within the 6 months of the year we find another location, then we find a location and we're not tied to that 1-year lease. That's where I'm coming from. But I thank you for clarifying the holding over, unless our city attorney has another way of seeing it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you. Any other comments, Councilman Nicol?
Yeah, what is the status of the old City Hall? Where are we at with that now?
Well,
what's happening?
If I may, Chris, when I brought you the 2020 action plan in January, I said that we would have something back to you before the end of the year on a plan so that the council could decide. They have some options on whether to demo it and start over, rebuild it as it is, or sell the building and move on. So by the end of this year was the plan that we agreed to, that we'd be bringing something back.
The end of this year. And I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable renewing this lease as it exists. I think things have changed considerably in terms of the need for office space, both for us and within the market as a whole. I don't think this agreement really reflects the reality of what we're confronting now, and the fact that next budget year, we're going to have to make some significant reductions in our operations, and that should include reductions in lease space. I would like to perhaps entertain a substitute motion that for the time being, we assume a month-to-month, giving our city manager some time to reevaluate the need for perhaps the 8th floor altogether, and perhaps renegotiate this in a way that also allows us to move forward should we look at disposing of the City Hall building or have some other disposition of that building before the end of the year. But we've been spending a lot of money on lease space. We have a lot of our own space that is just sitting vacant. And I think the taxpayers deserve that we be good stewards of their money And I think I certainly would be willing to entertain a reduction in the amount of space we have at the Veneer Tower. I don't think, I personally as a council member do not need a personal office. I think I can meet with the city manager or with staff in a shared conference room. I've been working from home for the better part of almost 3 months now, and it seems to be working okay. So I think we could probably cut out some fat and cut out some of that lease space that I think is somewhat superfluous at this point, given our circumstances. So with that, I will put a substitute motion on the floor that for the time being, we look at a month-to-month lease and then go back and renegotiate with Banner based on the actual space that we need, considering of the need potentially to eliminate the council offices. I will leave to the mayor his discretion whether or not he believes he needs an office or the same amount of space. But I think we can do a lot with less space and save the taxpayers money.
Thank you,
My
Councilman.
motion, substitute motion, month to month.
Yeah, there's a second by Councilmember Ibarra. Thank you, Councilman. All right, if the clerk would call the roll, please, on the substitute motion made by Henry Nickel, with a second by Councilmember Ibarra, month to month.
Councilmember Sanchez?
On the substitute motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
No.
Councilmember Charette?
No.
Councilmember Nickel?
Councilmember Nickel, if you unmute your mic for us.
Yes.
Just for the record. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and Councilmember Mulvihill?
No.
The vote's 3-3 with Councilmember Richard absent.
Yeah, in point of order, I want to just make an announcement to the city council and our any viewing audience. Councilmember Richard was here for closed session through about item number 3, and she was called out on an emergency, a family emergency. So let's keep her in our prayers, please. But she had to exit stage right and attend to her family. So, and Miss City Clerk, it's a tie. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And I will veto it if to break the tie. Do I have that? I certainly have that privilege, Miss.
Well, you actually have the vote. You have the ability to vote when there's a tie vote.
Yeah. Well, I'll vote no on it.
Okay. So then you go back.
One motion is by Councilman Charette and Councilman Mulvihill on the staff recommendation.
Yeah. Move the original proposal.
Right. Yes.
If Miss City Clerk would call the roll on the floor, staff recommendation by Fred and Jim Mulvihill.
Okay. Councilmember Sanchez?
No.
Councilmember Ibarra?
No.
Councilmember Figueroa?
No.
Councilmember Charette?
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Mulvihill?
Yes.
The motion does not pass. It's 2-4.
At this point, I would like to continue a conversation on this issue before we move on. Right now, we're presented with a budget deficit. This city can no longer afford some of the luxuries. I plenty enjoy my office here, but I toured this morning the 3rd floor, and there's enough space in there for the mayor, his staff, the council staff.
Didn't it fail? Why are we talking about it? Didn't it?
Because
fail?
we can continue to talk about it. That's why.
Why?
Because this is an important issue. That's why.
Juan shifted his vote.
Yeah.
Let's shift the vote.
Hold on, guys. Just a minute. Let's Councilman Sanchez, I'll recognize you in just a moment, sir. Just give me 10 seconds. Councilman Figueroa, you switched your vote. Can you please help us explain why?
No, I never switched my vote. I just voted no twice.
No, we have you recorded as a.
No twice.
He voted no for the secondary motion, and he voted no for the motion on the floor, the original motion.
He wants to move back to the City Hall building.
Absolutely. I think we do have a home with City Hall, but I understand that that's not really what's on the table for discussion tonight. I'm willing to entertain maybe a 6-month lease. I don't think we need a 12-month lease, but with the expectation that we're going to have this conversation about our permanent home, maybe starting in July. I don't know what that's going to look like as far as whether it's a workshop or what that's going to look like. I don't think that 12 months, look, if COVID has taught us anything, is that the future of office space is definitely going to look a lot different than what it is, than what we know it as today, especially as we're starting to see a lot of jobs are being able to be performed remotely. And so there potentially could be a lot of differences in the future as far as what office space looks like. But for right now, I don't think 12 months, I'm not on board with that. 6 months, I would make the motion for a 6-month with the expectation of let's start having that conversation about our historic City Hall that's just adjacent to the Veneer Tower.
So I think at this time it would be most.
$30 million retrofit.
Hold on, Fred. There's a motion by Councilman Figueroa. Does anybody support Councilman's substitute motion on a 6-month with the study workshop on a City Hall?
Wait a minute. Point of order. We voted on the thing and it failed. So why are we going to vote again? I mean, I don't.
Because we can. That's why it's an item on the agenda. We can discuss it until we vote to move forward, or the chair decides to move forward.
We did vote.
Okay. All right. So let's clarify. So is there a second to Councilman Figueroa?
I'll second it if the landlord's willing to entertain a 6-month lease.
Ms. City Manager.
Thank you, Councilman Nickel. That's exactly what I was going to say. Please know that whatever you say that's above and beyond what we've presented tonight.
It's a counter offer. It's a counter offer to the lease that's been offered.
Exactly.
Right.
So the thing is,
there's a motion and a second. Councilman Sanchez.
I would make if the council member from the 3rd Ward would be amenable to an adjustment, I would direct the staff to enter into negotiations with the building management to see what it would cost, what kind of savings the city would see if we were to just occupy the first floor and the 3rd floor, and what kind of cost savings we would have from vacating the 8th floor. And then bring those negotiations or those numbers back to this council to decide at that point, once we have good numbers as to whether it is worth vacating the 8th floor and just occupying the 1st and 3rd floor, or whether we would best be served by continuing to occupy the 8th floor as well as the 1st and 3rd. Without these numbers, I don't think we can make a good decision. So, council member, along with that, the most important thing that the council member from the 3rd Ward brought up was that the staff also bring back some sort of preliminary report on where we stand in relation to our vacated City Hall building, at least to refresh the public and the council members as to why we're not occupying that building.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Mr. Figueroa, your response?
I'm willing to support that. That's fine. We can vacate the 8th floor.
And then who was the seconder? Councilman Nickel, you're okay with that?
I'll support the second still.
Great. We're full of solutions tonight. City Council, I love it. Let's hope they're real. And we hope that our Veneer lease will hold us in hands with this. Just a reminder, I mean, I really hear the good conversation. I like it, folks. I like that city council members are thinking and we're trying to be creative, and I like the solutions.
And just real quick, Mayor, if we can get a quick explanation as far as for the public's education, as far as why we wouldn't be able to use some of the other buildings that we have, like the EDA building.
Well, not tonight, but we'll put that in the study workshop, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
But my position is we certainly need to determine the longevity of our future, and We have a lot to do right now, city council members, to think about the Measure Z coming up, lots of implication, a lot of busy work for our staff. So contemplate the burdens placed upon our staff. We'll get through this, we'll be fine. But the other side of this is the long-term effect of COVID, the impacts to our TOT, sales tax. And while I don't want to be a negative Nelly here, we have done some significant tenant improvements for the Veneer Tower to be here, to occupy here. So we'll have to do some cost analysis on the move out if we do decide that. But I think there's enough direction for Terry and her team to work on a next action plan. The motion is made by Councilman Figueroa with a second by Councilman Nickel. Thank you, Councilman Sanchez, for adding that element to it. Let's go ahead and Miss City Clerk, there you are. Could you please call the roll on that motion, please?
Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Yes.
Councilmember Charette.
No.
Councilmember Nickel.
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
No.
Okay, the motion passes 4-2 with Councilmembers Charette and Mulvihill opposing.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5, it's the issue purchase orders for unmarked police vehicle. This is repealing resolution number 2020-74 and authorizing Director of Finance to amend the fiscal year 2019 adopted budget and issue multiple orders not to exceed $115,000. And the operative word on the staff recommendation is for the best option vendors selected. So, Ms. City Manager, you can provide some background.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Interim Chief McBride is going to give the report, but I just wanted to remind you that we had an item on the last agenda to award a purchase order to CarMax for undercover police cars. I received several requests from several of you to bring the item back and to allow multiple bids on those cars so that some of our local vendors could bid. So Interim Chief McBride is going to give you a report on this.
If I could ask a question, though, that maybe the chief could answer during his presentation. And I think the last item that we talked about with CarMax was $90,000, wasn't it? It seemed to me it was $90,000, and now it's $115,000. So
the 90,000 was for the cars, and the other was for the equipment. But Chief can explain.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yeah, please proceed, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Common Council. The San Bernardino Police Department has recently reestablished special investigative units. These teams are responsible for investigating narcotics activity, vice-related activity, and apprehending violent criminals with the intent to reduce crime throughout the city. The newly established vice team mission is to investigate and reduce the occurrence of illegal gaming, prostitution, and human trafficking. The special investigative teams have conducted numerous operations and made arrests that impacted a fine area in the San Manuel Grant Agreement. Additionally, the vice team will reduce the frequency of prostitution and human trafficking that affects the surrounding community as well throughout the entire city. The San Manuel Public Safety representatives have advised that a reduction in vice-related crimes may have a significant impact considering the new hotel scheduled to open to accommodate the San Manuel casino guests. The department's special investigative teams use pre-owned, unmarked police vehicles to investigate and apprehend criminals. These vehicles must be non-uniform, indistinct, and have the appropriate emergency equipment installed. Since 2014, the San Bernardino Police Department has purchased pre-owned, unmarked vehicles using 2 different purchasing procedures. On 3 occasions, the mayor and city council approved buying pre-owned vehicles from CarMax after CarMax was identified as the best option due to the large inventory. In 2018 and 2019, the city solicited bids by issuing RFQs. I must say that Fairview Ford was the only vendor in the city to respond to the RFQ. Gathering competitive bids through an RFQ process for pre-owned vehicles is problematic since these types of vehicles exist in varying conditions that affect the price. A vendor with a larger inventory of vehicles provides the city with the option to purchase the most effective car at the best available price. Staff is requested to use the San Manuel Grant Agreement funds for the purchase of at least 5 pre-owned vehicles at a total cost not to exceed $115,000 to be used by special investigative units. Staff will solicit bids for individual vehicles following the open market procedures outlined in the San Bernardino Municipal Code 3.04.080. Just want to kind of explain that process. Purchase of supplies and materials and equipment of value in the amount of $50,000 or less may be made by the purchasing agent in the open market in accordance with the following procedure. Minimum number of bids. Open market purchases shall, whenever possible, be based on at least 3 bids and shall be awarded the lowest and best bidder. The purchasing agent will solicit bids by written request or by telephone to prospective vendors. Sealed written bids shall be submitted to the purchasing agent time after the submission of bids or the placing of orders. This record, while so kept, shall be open to the public inspection. The open market purchases for which no bids are required for open market is anything that's doesn't exceed $2,500. So these vehicles would exceed that amount. At this point, take any questions.
Very good. Let's open it up for questions. Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, there was mention about the city not being able to afford these cars. I think that's some misinformation going out there. Where are the funds that are paying for these cars coming from?
As outlined in the staff report, that money is held in trust. It's a grant from the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians to be used for the project area, but they've also extended to see the purpose of having a citywide vice sniffing that can go out and affect human trafficking. The city benefits not only the tribe, but the city as a whole. So that money is not
grant money.
General fund, it's grant monies that's restricted in its use.
Exactly. All right, that was it. I move to approve.
Second. Okay, and my other question.
Councilman Mulvihill. Councilman Charette, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My question again, maybe I missed it last time, but I thought it was 4 vehicles at 90,000, and now it's 5 vehicles at 115,000. Am I right or wrong on that?
The vehicles are for not to exceed 90,000, but then it also includes the safety equipment, which brings that total to $115,000. So the vehicles do not exceed $90,000, but there's added safety equipment.
Okay, but and originally it was for 5 vehicles at 90,000, not to exceed.
Oh, I'm mistaken. No, we actually moved it up to 5 vehicles, so it's 5 vehicles at 115,000.
Yeah,
so we're not installing the license.
In 2 weeks, the numbers change. It's gone from 90,000 for 4 to 115,000 for 5, and so now I'm assuming that that would be another $25,000 difference. There's still money that's got to be spent on the equipment on top of the 115.
We've chosen to actually purchase the additional vehicle and not outfit the vehicles with the equipment.
Huh. I don't support what's going on right now.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. All right, let's members.
I got a comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mulvihill.
Yeah, keep in mind the resolution simply opens up the options. In other words, what was voted on last time was simply it allowed CarMax purchase, and what we're voting on tonight is to open up to other potential vendors. And hopefully they'll be local. And again, it's the best option vendors. It includes CarMax. It includes a lot of other people. So again, this has nothing to do with vice or narcotics or violent crime. Because the cars are going to be, again, from the best options. Thank you.
Councilmember Ibarra, last time you alluded to E Street car sale dealers. Have you made any direct approaches to these car dealers and what?
No, you know what? This took me by surprise. I was happy to see this, actually. Thank you, staff, for reconsidering opening up to others. The only concern I have, though, and I want to thank Chief McBride and our city manager for responding to my questions, is the money's coming from San Manuel. It's a grant from them. And thank you, Eric, for responding. You did say that you've had discussions with them already and that they understand the value of having the vice team operational throughout the whole city. If they're comfortable, is there any way we can have that in writing? Because I don't want to later have a problem with San Manuel saying, oh, you purchased these vehicles, but you use them in the city and not in our project area. Is there something in writing that we can have attached to this as well?
if that's the direction from the council and the city manager, we can pursue that.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with having something of that in writing from them, especially since we are trying to target all the trouble spots in our city as well, and with their grant money. That's my only concern. I want to make sure that we're following their direction. But
thank you, Councilmember Ibarra. Mr. Nickel.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is the city's procurement policies preclude us from notifying local vendors of an RFQ when it's released? I know I've been involved in RFQs, and one of the things I do is I do contact vendors and let them know that we've released an RFQ. Do we do that?
I believe that during that process that it's publicly noticed, and I think that they do send notices to local vendors.
So local dealerships were directly notified, or we just put a notice out and hope they learn about it? We post in the paper and on benefits.
If I may, Councilman, we can directly notify them, and they can also sign up.
I think that would be very, very wise.
And many of them have already signed up on our Planet Bids to be notified automatically, but if not, we can still reach out and notify them.
And I'll just be honest, this is sort of a public relations issue as well. We're dealing with a significant economic downturn right now. A lot of our local businesses are hurting. We need to show good faith and leadership in terms of providing opportunities for our local businesses. We need them. They provide that sales tax base. They provide the money that pays the salaries that employ all of our staff, and we need them. So I think it's very wise moving forward that we at least extend somewhat of a courtesy and provide some notification to them of these opportunities to partner with the city and use these taxpayer funds in a way that creates that virtuous cycle of wealth and prosperity that will ultimately help us in terms of our budget as well.
Okay, good points. Yes.
Thank you. I have just a quick clarification. I want to make it clear. I support the idea of going out to bid and doing all we can to keep it with local vendors. I have the concern I have is that in 2 weeks we went from 4 cars and $90,000 to now it's 5 cars and $115,000. I just don't kind of get that. And now we're not going to equip them, but we were going to equip them. That all doesn't make sense to me. And the final question I have is really a question. Can we give a local preference percentage, like a 5% local preference to a local in the city of San Bernardino vendor?
I think we already do, Fred. I mean, there's a.
I don't know. If we do,
my understanding is that we do.
We
City manager.
Our municipal code does have a local vendor preference. I don't have it in front of me, but we do provide a local vendor preference.
So just to be clear, so if somebody gave someone from Ontario and somebody from San Bernardino gave the exact same bid, the San Bernardino vendor would get it because they automatically get a benefit.
If the benefit made the bid lower, but I would have to check the municipal code to see exactly what that is.
Well, that's what I want to try to do.
And I will get you that information.
Just to make sure that our vendors have an edge here in San Bernardino. To keep the sales tax here, to keep the sales here, to keep the employees and the business here in town.
Good. All right, let's members, let's cast our votes, please. We got a motion and a second. Ms. City Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
yes, but we need that letter on file. Thank you.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Sorry, I was trying to unmute there. Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our public hearings portion, item number 6, public hearing regarding the resolution of establishing certain fees for services furnished by the city. It is approximately 9:11 p.m. and I am opening the public hearing at 9:11 p.m. Could I get a staff report on this item? The city manager?
Mayor and Council, as you recall, at the last council meeting, Rita Conrad gave you an overview of the fees, and she asked you if you had any changes or you were agreeable to the increase in fees. And we brought this item back tonight, which she would be adopting the resolution during the public hearing to actually adopt those fees that she discussed at the last meeting. She is on the line if you have any additional questions on these fees.
Staff, I'm sorry, city council members, the same items, and I think we could, if there's none, we'll suspend the presentation. This time, thank you, sir. Councilman Mulvihill, is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Sanchez, thank you, sir. And then Ms. City Clerk, are there any public comments submitted on this item?
No, there are not.
And does anyone wish to speak on this item? Anybody calling in or anything?
There were no requests to speak for this item.
All right, I'm now closing this public hearing at approximately 9:12 p.m. for deliberation and action. We have a motion by Councilman Mulvihill, the second. And if Ms. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 7, it's adopt a resolution approving the substantial amendment for section 108 loan. And Ms. City Manager, I'm sorry, let's open the public hearing at approximately 9:14 p.m. And Ms. City Manager, can I get a staff report?
Certainly, Mayor. Mike Huntley's going to give you this staff report. He alluded to it when he provided the Arden Guthrie agreement to you earlier.
Okay.
So thanks, Terry. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. As Terry had mentioned, I did allude to this as part of the Arden Guthrie project. As I had provided information to Council, the city did actually go out and apply for a Section 108 loan. And then on September 16, 2006, the city did enter into a contract with HUD for the Section 108 funds. Now, the Section 108 funds were specifically to be used for the Arden Guthrie property, specifically for land acquisition, lot consolidations, the relocation of tenants on the property to include demolition of the existing structures, as well as the demolition of some of the infrastructure on the property as well. As I've indicated, the city entered this contract back in 2006, and it's some 14 years later, and HUD continues to emphasize the importance of actually complying with the national objectives, which is creating jobs for low to moderate income people. The city did comply with the main intent of the grant, and as I've described, was used correctly. However, just because we use the funds correctly, we need to also comply with the national objectives. City staff has had numerous meetings with HUD over the last 6 to 8 months. HUD has reemphasized over and over again compliance with the national objectives. So during our discussions, we did clarify to HUD that the site plan that is now being proposed for the Arden Guthrie site was different than the entitled site plan improvements that go back to 2012 when Mark Development had their entitlements approved by the city. HUD felt it was in the best interest of the city to do a substantial amendment, directed us to do such, which is why we're in front of you tonight. What the intent was is to share with the council and community the types of changes that will have occurred. They also had us create a time frame and benchmarks for completion. So we did create a substantial amendment document that's attached to this. HUD has looked at it. They've made comments to us. Really, at the end of the day, this is a document that is created to show that the city is serious about moving the project forward and serious with complying with HUD's direction. So the document is being presented to you tonight for consideration. There is a resolution that goes along with it. And really, it's just to show the city's commitment for compliance, identify the changes that did occur with the project, and identify that the applicant is fully aware of their obligations to comply with the national objectives also. Mm-hmm. So with that concludes my presentation. If you'd like,
Mr. Huntley.
Questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comment cards? Or anyone wishing to speak on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, very good. I'm now closing the public hearing at approximately 9:17 p.m. for deliberation and action. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approve.
Councilman Mulvihill, is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Ibarra. The city clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Okay. Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Surratt,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, Ms. City Clerk. First reading, item number 8, first reading of ordinance MC 1531 for the sign regulation update. I requested the city clerk read the title into the record before discussion takes place. Ms. City Clerk.
Okay, it's ordinance number MC 1531, ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of San Bernardino, California, adopting the negative declaration and approving development code amendment 19-04, updating chapter 19.22 sign regulations and amending chapter 19.20 property development standards of the city of San Bernardino development code.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. City Clerk. I opened the public hearing at approximately 9:19. Could I get a staff report on this item, please?
Mayor, our planning manager, Oliver Mahica, is here, and he will introduce his team to give this presentation.
Welcome, sir. If you'd unmute your mic. Oliver, if you unmute your mic, please. There you go.
Am I okay now?
Yep, there you go.
Go back to my introduction. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. It's nice to be back at one of these meetings, even if it's virtually, but we're still moving forward. As you know, we've been working on the sign ordinance for quite some time now. Our code was last adopted in 1991. And a few things have changed over the last 30 years as it relates to signage and what have you. Business needs and trends have changed. Techniques and technology has also been, changed over time. And there also have been some court decisions that regulate what we can and cannot permit or regulate as it relates to signage. Through the effort and the assistance of the Chamber of Commerce, there was a series of focus groups to get their input. So I would like to thank those that participated in that group, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. In January of this year, the Planning Commission considered this item and they adopted Resolution 2020-006, forwarding the recommendation to the council, the adoption, or excuse me, the introduction of the ordinance for this item, and also to schedule for the final reading on the meeting of June 3rd. Genevieve Starro from MIG, our consulting firm that's been working with us for the last couple of years, she'll be doing the PowerPoint presentation. If I may also want to give a shout out to Chantal Power. You may recall one of our former associate planners. She spent a bulk of the time working on this with Genevieve, and she was spearheading this. I did call her today to thank her for her efforts and let her know that it was coming up for consideration this evening. At this point, I kind of feel like the field goal kicker at the end of the game, just taking it home. With that, I'd like to introduce Genevieve. Travis Martin is also in the audience with us. So if we get into technical questions of sorts, I will possibly call on him to provide that assistance. Genevieve, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Oliver. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Next slide, please. So tonight, as Oliver introduced, I'd like to go over just a little bit of the intent of why the sign code was initiated for an update, the process that we went through, and also go through the draft regulations with you briefly tonight. Next slide. So signs are a key factor that businesses rely on, as we know, to ensure that their customers can find their services, and they're really crucial to attract and draw customers, create brand recognition and marketing, and also to foster safety by helping folks identify the locations they're trying to get to. And signs also make a significant impact, as you know, on the aesthetic appearance of a community. Next slide. So as we're crafting sign regulations, it's really important to carefully craft them to avoid certainly too much signage, which becomes ineffective as businesses get lost in the clutter. Next slide. And also to right size the standards so that signs are not so small that they can't be read. Next. So as Oliver mentioned, the existing sign regulations have not been updated since 1991. And since then, a lot of things have changed, certainly. Businesses have evolved in how they're advertising and what they need. Sign technologies have advanced, and legal rulings, most significantly, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision of Reed versus the Town of Gilbert back in 2015 really affects how jurisdictions can regulate signs. The Reed case clarified that signs should really only be regulated based on what they call place, time, and manner. And so that is where the sign's located, how long it could be posted or illuminated, and how the message is displayed, such as sign or height. So at kind of bottom line, the sign regulations have to be content neutral, meaning that you should not have to read a sign in order to implement the regulation. So this update seeks not only to comply with these legal requirements, but also to bring clarity to the regulations in a user-friendly way and address emerging sign issues. Next slide. So the process was initiated soon after the Reed case was finalized. Next slide. As part of the process, the team met with the Planning Commission to receive their direction at the outset of the program and asked what they would like to see achieved. The city is lucky to have a sign expert on their Planning Commission who owns a sign company who is just a great resource throughout the update. So we then met with the business community, spearheaded by the Chamber of Commerce and representatives of sign companies, major auto property owners, realtors, to really discuss how the sign regulations were working for them and what issues they would like to see addressed. With that input, the team crafted revised regulations and brought a draft back to that business community to kind of test drive it with them and see if we got it right with what they saw as kind of priorities to address, as well as to comply with new laws and to make it really easy to use and flexible, which is what we heard from them. So input from that group on that test drive was folded back into the draft and brought back to Planning Commission for the review. And there, the Planning Commission weighed in on some key issues about sign programs and how they should function. The project was put on hold a bit due to staff changes, and then picked back up. And the Planning Commission reviewed some revised changes that really tightened the code up. And Planning Commission weighed in on that final draft and recommended approval for the revised code. Next slide. This is a kind of a visual process update of what we went through to get to where we are today. And the next slide. Key input that we received through the engagement process really focused on promoting good design. Folks recognized that it was really important to the aesthetic of the community to have good signage. There was also discussion about a need to address emerging trends, such as lifestyle graphics, or kind of the tall wall style graphics, and other creative signs that we may not even know what they are yet, but to be able to be flexible and reactive to accommodate really high quality creative signs. LED signs, certainly digital signs, are an emerging topic as well, and were discussed in detail. Stakeholders also indicated a need to provide a lot more flexibility. As we often hear working on development codes, folks want flexibility, but also certainty. So within defined parameters, some flexibility really does help support just accomplishing a good high quality product. So what we looked at was including a reduction in restrictions related to the number of signs, just to provide flexibility while still maintaining an overall maximum sign area. And also looking at certain reviews that could happen at the director level rather than going through a public review process at the Planning Commission level. But fundamentally, stakeholders wanted an easy to use sign code with good images and examples in addition to text. Next slide. So the regulations were fully reviewed and reorganized to provide for ease of use. In some cases, sections were removed and others were reorganized to new locations. Next. And I'll just briefly go over the sections included in the new regulations. The first is to establish a public purpose for the sign regulations. And it's really intended to be used as a basis for making discretionary decisions with a clear statement about what the overarching objectives are for regulating signs. That is public safety, aesthetics, and economic development. Next. This section, the second section, applies applicability, provides clarity for users and some best practices about First Amendment rights. So again, to comply with Supreme Court decisions. And it also includes a section called severability, which means that if any one section is found to be unlawful, the rest of the code still stands. And this section also clarifies exemptions, what we call exemptions. These are any signs that don't require a sign permit. And some things that are not signs don't require a sign permit all the time. And certain signs are exempt with limitations. So they're exempt if they meet some certain requirements about height or size, such as window signs or commercial mascots or sign twirlers, for example. And this section was updated to implement consistent timeframes with regard to these exempt and temporary signs, as is consistent with best practices. Next. This section sets the framework for how sign regulations will be implemented, including necessary legal clarification and a process for interpretation by the Community and Economic Development Director. And it also describes the required design quality, construction and maintenance of all signs, and sets standards related to illumination, such as requiring residential properties to be considered with direct line of sight and shielding of exterior light sources. A new section was also added to define rules of measurement, and this was really important to stakeholders to make it very clear as they approach the code how the signs will be measured so that they are accurate when they submit their applications. Next. Certain signs were called out through the outreach process to be prohibited moving forward. Pole signs is one of these. Many cities prohibit new pole signs moving forward and instead allow for what's called pylon signs, which have a less basic pole structure and more aesthetic appeal with some cladding. Signs that emit noise, odor, and smoke are also prohibited, as well as digital window signs. The stakeholder group felt that they were often too bright and difficult to enforce. There's one additional change. Portable or A-frame sandwich styles portable signs are currently prohibited everywhere in the city, and this update would allow for these types of signs only in the Main Street area downtown with an encroachment permit if it's located in a sidewalk area. This new section, Design Principles for Signage, helps establish the foundation for some general requirements for the review of proposed signs. It updates, it codifies some design principles that were part of design guidelines, and this can really be used to help decision makers in making discretionary reviews and facilitate sign permit application review by staff. Next slide. The sign permits and programs section identifies who is responsible for reviewing each type of permit, be it staff or the Planning Commission, as well as appeal authorities. Most sign permits and processes are reviewed at the staff or director level, which was consistent with what we heard from the Planning Commission and the stakeholder group. The Planning Commission, however, would review major permits, such as the creative sign permit, iconic sign permit, which I'll discuss in a bit, as well as any billboard removal and relocation requests. A new process was also crafted to allow for additional flexibility. Applicants can apply for a 10% deviation from standards. To be approved, certain findings have to be made, but the intent for this is really to avoid the need for as many sign variances. And this often comes across as an issue when trying to accommodate a business logo or another emblem. Next slide. So two new permits that were established as part of this process would be the creative sign permit, which provides a discretionary process to allow for these kind of creative signs of unique design that could foster economic development and community identity. So this process would allow for a deviation from standards with Planning Commission review with the findings that there is exceptional design quality and it meets contextual criteria as well. There's also a new iconic sign permit that's proposed that this would provide an incentive to retain some of the great historic iconic signs that are in the city by exempting the iconic sign from overall sign area and also allowing for it to be potentially moved on a property. Next slide. A comprehensive sign program provides a mechanism to integrate signs that are part of a larger cohesive development. So the standards indicate when such a sign program would be required and allow for certain deviations from standards. And in addition to provide flexibility to these multi-tenant centers, sign programs allow applicants to choose kind of how to allocate a portion of their allowed sign area. So we were calling it a sign budget. For example, they could choose to apply some of that area that's allowed on wall signs towards a monument sign and vice versa. The Planning Commission weighed in on this and the appropriate amount that they felt should be associated with that sign budget. Next slide. The regulations for how much sign area is actually allowed and the heights and the very specific requirements were not substantially revised in this update. Really, the focus was on providing a clear process and flexibility through the process and clarifying and being consistent with legal requirements. Certain standards were removed to focus instead on the total allowed sign area rather than nuances such as the number of signs. So for an example, it would be a grocery store in the past was limited to a certain number of wall signs, but there's a difficulty if they want to also have a bakery sign and a bank sign and a coffee shop sign that all happens to exist within that grocery store. So this removes that impediment for that type of development. Next slide. This section provides additional clarifications and regulations for each type of sign, be it a wall sign, canopy sign, pylon sign, etc. And there are a few specific uses that also have additional allowances because just of the unique nature of their business, such as gas stations, drive-throughs, freeway, proximate uses. Next. Temporary sign regulations currently are very narrowly crafted in the city's code, just on commercial grand opening kind of events. So these regulations were expanded to cover both non-commercial speech, so any kind of political, religious, or any other kind of speech that is not necessarily associated with a business or sale, as well as temporary signs in residential areas, and established a purpose and standards and sign types for all of these temporary signs. Next slide. So the current sign regulations regulate all billboards under the section called off-site signs, meaning that the sign is advertising something that's not located on the same site. Sign experts recommend changing this practice to focus more on the economic model of billboards, that they're really independent land use and economic generators available for purchase. We're referring to them as general advertising or general advertising for hire. This certainly also reflects the growth in LED signs and the fact that certainly that could be an off-site sign. So the billboard section was narrowly revised to limit new billboards to freeway or city-owned property, and also to remove a 5-foot setback requirement that is not consistent with what Caltrans requires. So we wanted to be consistent there. Next slide. The non-conforming section clarifies that existing legal non-conforming signs may be retained but must be maintained. The updated regulations also include provisions that provide more specific direction about the type of alterations that can be made, and to allow for routine maintenance and repairs that do not expand the nonconformity of the sign. Next. This new section refers to applicable enforcement chapters of the municipal code and establishes a process for illegal and abandoned signs and appeals and abatement. And signs on public property section. In general, private property signs are not allowed in the public right-of-way or on public property unless they are personally attended, meaning someone's holding it. However, A-frame signs, as I mentioned, would be allowed in the Main Street overlay zone. Next. And then finally, the definition section was updated. This is actually not a very fancy part of the code or exciting, but it is very important to provide additional clarity through the text and graphics in the definition section. Thank you, and I am available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mojica, did you have anything to add?
No, nothing. We're available for questions, and if you, whatever the nature may be, again, Travis is available too. If you have some practical questions on the implementation, he's available to answer that as well.
Very good, thank you. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comment cards on this matter?
No,
or anyone wishing to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay, I'm closing the public hearing now at approximately 9:38 p.m. for deliberation action. And do we have a motion?
I have a comment or a question.
Okay, do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move for approval.
Yeah, second.
The second by Henry and Jim. All right, Mr. Charette.
Yeah, my question, and maybe I missed it. There was a lot of material there, and very good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Again, a lot of material, and maybe I missed this, but does our ordinance cover a window in a storefront that is? What is the percentage that a storefront window can be covered? It's like there is a percentage, right?
Yes, there is a percentage. It is 25%.
So in other words, if a window, I'm speaking of a specific store that actually has two storefront windows, and in the middle of it is a door, the entry, and the only thing that you can actually see through is the door, because the windows on both sides of the door on the storefront are completely closed off, but with signage or the name of the store or whatever it is. They're like the whole window is completely covered. That's illegal, right?
Yes. Window signs are limited to 25% coverage.
25%. And so I guess at this point in time, if the chief is around, or if anybody can answer, or we can talk about it later, are we going after those kinds of violations?
Well, we can certainly check into that. Why don't you give us the address of the property that you're talking about, and we'll talk about that.
Right. Thank you.
All right, Ms. City Clerk, let's go ahead and call the roll if there's no Councilmember Ibarra.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Mulvihill.
Yes. Genevieve, time, place, manner, but content neutral. Can you give an example of a sign that's not content neutral?
Sure. So I can give the example of what the Reed case really is based on, and that is the town of Gilbert had allowed for real estate signs to be allowed off-site, so directing folks to a real estate sale, but a church wanted to be able to direct folks to their services on Sunday with off-site signs. It came before code enforcement, and they came for a permit, and it was very clear in the code that real estate signs were allowed, but other signs were not mentioned and thus not allowed. Thus, they were denied that permit and sued. So because you had to read the sign in order to determine that it was a real estate sign, not a church directional sign, that was not content neutral.
So with regard to the church signs, were they, I'm just trying to think, were the church signs content neutral?
So it's less that the sign is content neutral and more that the regulation has to be content neutral.
In other words, it doesn't govern what the content of the sign happens to be.
Exactly.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Ibarra, I see you waving your hand.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Hold on. Let me get in there. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes. Go
ahead.
Right. Yes.
All right. So just to clarify, the section 19.22.8080 temporary signs, that and I think I caught it when you said it. That's the political signs as well. Like when we're running for office, we would follow this sign, this ordinance, for example, for the signs. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I made that note. Thank you.
Councilman Figueroa.
Thank you. I just have 3 questions, really. Hopefully they don't take too much time. And I read through it trying to answer some of my questions. I was able to answer many of them just by reading it, but some of the things that I wasn't able to find in there are signs or billboards that are on people's private properties or on top of buildings and roofs. Is that just no longer allowed? Is that a vestige of billboard past, or I didn't really see that in there.
Sure. So no new billboards would be permitted. The city currently has a standard that requires for any signs that any new would require removal of certain signs and agreement associated with that. So any existing ones would be fine to stay, but no new billboards could be placed anywhere except as indicated near the freeway and on city property.
Thank you. There was one section under design principles, section D, readability. Now, of course, I want to always remain sensitive to the creativity of billboards. So what exactly is meant by readability? So a sign that's upside down, for example, would that be considered not readable?
So I think the intent behind readability is that we're looking for ways to enhance public safety, because we're not supposed to have to read them, but if it is in a way that is confusing, that is when this would come into play. I think if it could cause traffic and other kind of impediments, that's what this is intended to avoid.
Okay, so a sign advertising, like if you can read this and it's upside down, it's, call accident attorney or something like that. That would still be allowed. Okay. Now you alluded to it a little bit earlier as far as the pylons, and I remember reading in there that the pylons are allowed to have 8 signs, I believe, per pylon. So there's a limit with that. Is there a limit on pylons? So could a property have 2 pylons, in essence, having 16 signs in total? Is that allowed?
It would depend on the length of their business frontage. If they have a large enough business frontage, if they have a tiny, tiny little lot, they couldn't. But if they have a large enough frontage, they could have 2 in theory. And also they could use a digital sign if they had more tenants than spaces available. And the intent behind limiting those is to really enhance the readability. It gets totally lost if you have 300 individual tiny signs on a pylon sign.
Okay. And then one other thing, I know I said 3, but I just realized another.
Your 4th one, Councilman.
I know. What about signs that, I know it says it was somewhere in there where it had to be maintained within the border of the billboard, but sometimes there are signs where the graphic leaves the border of the billboard. It was, is that something that was also limited or restricted?
So the way that what we did was we added a rules of sign measurement section. So we clarify kind of how you measure that, and you would go up and over. You can have 8 corners when you measure your area. So if you have something that goes out of a standard rectangle shape, it shows how you would measure to include that to count it within the sign area.
Thank you. No more questions, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilman Figueroa. Very good questions. Genevieve, I have a question. What does your credential MIG stand for?
That is Moore, Isofano, and Goltzman, our founding fathers and mother.
Great. And final comment to our staff members. Thank you for joining us, Travis. We appreciate you. I'm seeing a lot of good projects, Travis. Good job. And Mr. Mojica, I love your hairdo.
You do?
Awesome.
I think it's been a whole 9 weeks since my last haircut.
Well, mine's growing too here, so I'm like, yes. All right, we have a motion in a second, folks. Let's call the roll here so we can keep moving.
Okay,
the city clerk.
The motion was made by Councilmember Nichols, second by Councilmember Mulvihill. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Yes.
Councilmember Charette?
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel?
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. We appreciate all your professionalism and thank you for helping us in this big project. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 9 and our staff. Thank you, Oliver and Travis and Mr. Huntley. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, street vacation of a portion of Artesia Street south of Rialto Avenue. I'm sorry. I got to read the script here. We're now opening the public hearing at approximately 9:47 p.m. Could I get a staff report on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, the next 2 items, 9 and 10, are street vacations, and Chris or Alex will be giving the presentation.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor. Actually, being that you were kind of running through things quickly here, I was going to give you the option of the presentation or just kind of a quick download, and we can talk about it. I'm sorry?
Staff report brief. How about that?
Staff report brief.
Yeah.
So the engineering team had received a request to vacate a portion of Artesia south of Rialto. The portion that was asked to be vacated is actually surrounded on the north and the south by portions of Artesia that are already vacated and have been vacated since the early, I believe it's 1960s. There was a portion that was vacated for the San Bernardino County Flood Control District. And then you see the portion north of it. We've just kind of got this sliver that got forgotten. And so we had a request from one of the property owners in the area to go ahead and completely vacate that section. We got the approval from council to move forward with setting up this public hearing. We've provided notices to the property owners. We have not received any comments back and don't have any requests that I'm aware of in terms of utilities. So we're really just looking to get this last 518 feet of Artesia vacated for the people in the area.
Okay, thank you, staff. We appreciate it, Chris. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comment cards or anyone wishing to speak and address on this matter?
No, we do not.
Thank you, Ms. City Clerk. We will close the public hearing at approximately 9:50 p.m. for deliberation and action. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
With Councilman Fred Charette and Councilman Nickel on that. And are there any objections to it? All right, we have consensus. Ms. City Clerk, if you'd make that record of the vote. Item number 10, let's go ahead and this is an item of street vacation of portion of Home Avenue, I Street, Montgomery Street, and the reservation of utilities therein. It's a 2-part recommendation. I'm opening the hearing at approximately 9:51 p.m. Could I get a staff report on this, please?
Absolutely, Mayor. The item before you, as you stated, is for portions of Home, I, and Montgomery. This item was actually before the council a couple of years ago, and because of staff turnover, unfortunately, the process for vacating these portions was never finished. So we discussed this with the legal team and were advised that we needed to go ahead and go through it again. So we got permission from the council to do the investigation. We notified all of the property owners within 500 feet once again in the utilities, and we did not receive any comments any different from what we had the first time we went through the process. It has been through the Planning Commission, and they have approved, and we are now at the public hearing that the City Council approved us setting the date for at one of their previous council meetings, and are just looking for any additional public comments. We have not received any, and I don't believe Genevieve has, but.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jensen. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comments or anyone wishing to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you, Ms. City Clerk. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Councilman Nickel and Councilman Mulvihill, thank you. And if there's no objections, comments? Okay, good. by consensus, and if the city clerk would please take that into account. Thank you very much, staff. We appreciate it. Let's move on to our consent calendar. We'll ask council members from their respective wards, please, if you would have any pulls, and we'll begin that process now. Councilman Sanchez, any pulls?
No items to pull.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes, I'd like to pull item 13, item 18, and maybe item 19 for reconsideration from that public comment we had. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Figueroa?
None.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Charette?
Item 13 was already pulled. I wanted to pull that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Nickel?
None.
Thank you. Councilmember Mulvihill?
Mine's been pulled.
Thank you, sir. What item was it?
13.
Thank you, sir. All right. And is there a motion for the balance?
Move the balance.
With Nickel and Mulvihill. And is there any objections to the balance being moved? All right. By consensus, Ms. City Clerk, if you take that note. Let's go back into the polls for tonight. Council member, we have several council members on item number 13. Let's start it with Council Member Ibarra on item number 13. Ms. Ibarra, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. I don't mind letting my colleagues going first on this one, but I wanted to pull it just real quick. I wanted to get an update on the investigation going on before moving forward on this. And I don't know if the mayor needs to recuse himself on the discussion. Clarification from our city attorney. We're okay?
Well, if you're just getting an update, he has to disqualify himself if he will be voting or participating in making a decision in which he has an interest. So if you're merely asking for an update, I guess I would have to privy this by saying that you did receive an update in closed session from your outside legal counsel. I'm not working on the matter, so I can't give you any further update. And I don't know whether staff would be able to, as we mentioned to you, some of those matters were confidential and discussed in closed session.
Okay, because my understanding this is additional money, right, being requested?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same as my understanding. I guess I should let staff deal with that because I've had no interaction with the investigator. Okay. But my understanding is it's just a continuation of the matters that you assigned to her and some new claims that came in relation to the original claim.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Charette, sir?
Well, based on that, is Terry going to say anything about that?
Yeah, I was going to pipe. We also had a staff report at the last council meeting in addition to closed session, and we did provide an update, and we don't have any more new information for you.
I think my concern is for the public's benefit. They're very concerned about the drip of this investigation and what's going on. And I think there may be some confusion or concern or certainly interest in this now almost $80,000 it's going to be with the additional 30. Tonight it'll be at $80,000, and there's confusion, I think, by the public that they think that things have to happen within 45 days. But I think it's important for the public to understand that this is an ongoing process, and with each time a new charge or a new claimant or somebody new comes out, that's where we end up having to extend the interviews and the investigation itself. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is correct. And we explained that in the staff report on May 6th, as you recall. That is what's taking longer than anticipated.
Councilman Nickel. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, and I just also, I know there was a lot of concern about us providing representation for the mayor in this case, and we're legally bound. The other thing, back to the investigation itself, the public needs to know that we are legally bound to perform this investigation. Now, you could argue whether or not it's going efficiently, whether it's going quickly, whether it's going appropriately or not, but we have to come to a conclusion or a non-conclusion based on information that we get from the investigator that we've hired. And that investigator is working behind the scenes, doing interviews and what have you. My concern is the public was not, I don't think, happy with the idea of us providing legal representation to the mayor. And I may be on, Sonia, I may be on shaky ground here or not, but I think it's important for the public to know that we are not now providing that cost to the mayor.
My understanding is the mayor on his own has obtained legal counsel. He's now represented by his own attorney, and the city is not compensating him for his own attorney at this time.
And that was my understanding as well, and that's why I say I may be on shaky ground. I don't want to put anybody or the city in jeopardy in disclosing anything like that. But I think it's important. The public was not. I don't think they were happy about us providing any costs or providing any legal defense for the mayor. And I think it's important that the city, the public understands that we are not doing that. On the mayor's own choice, has chosen not to go with our representation and is on his own hired his own attorney. I just wanted to make that
Does
clear.
that conclude your comments, Mr. Charette?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that the additional $30,000, and I guess it could be more. Let's hope it's not. But
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Charette.
I would like to make one clarification, however, and Mayor, you probably understand that with respect to your taking the update, but I would advise you, of course, not to vote on this item. Well, the comments I made to the councilwoman about your remaining here to participate, you can accept the update. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that you should not participate in this item and taking action on this item.
By comments or votes or conducting
by
this item?
actually voting on the contract. So I got.
I understand. I understand. Thank you. I understand. I'm just trying to manage the traffic here on this item. Councilman Nickel and Councilman Mulvihill, sir, Mr. Nickel.
Just to be clear, this, the work product of this agreement is subject to attorney-client privilege?
Yes, the individual, my understanding is that the individual that the city has retained is an attorney. And so she is working for the city. And so
these are legal services that we are retaining.
Correct. As an investigator, legal services and operating as an investigator, correct.
Okay.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What is the consequence of us not approving this?
If you didn't approve this item this evening, you would not be in compliance with your own harassment policy, which says that when you do get a complaint that you will immediately investigate it and that the results would come back to you. I would absolutely not advise you. I would advise you to enter into the agreement. I would not advise you to not complete the investigation that has been started. It's part of your process. I absolutely understand the frustration with people in the public. I understand the amount of time it's taken. And I apologize to you that I can't answer those questions since you've hired outside legal counsel. But I think you need to complete this process in the best interest of the city being the municipal
And the only reason why I have some hesitation is I have yet to see the initial work product.
Yep.
I would like to see the initial work product before I extend an agreement for more work product.
Yeah.
But part of the reason for not seeing it is because of the drip and the
No, we've already paid for the first component work product. Now we're paying for more work product, and we haven't seen the work product.
Well, as you understand, when someone does an investigation, there are several phases of an investigation like this. The first phase is to gather information. The subsequent phase might be to interview witnesses. The third phase might be to follow up if there's more witnesses that need to be interviewed. And then a final phase is where you actually put pen to paper and you actually write out your findings. You might prepare an executive summary and then prepare your findings. So my understanding is that she has not interviewed all witnesses yet, but she is very close. And for those witnesses that will not cooperate, I think she's moving on to her final phase and will start drafting if she has not already started to draft.
Okay, Councilman Mulvihill, sir.
Yes, we may be obliged to provide an investigator, but we should know how much we're being charged. How much is this investigator charging us per hour?
I will have to look. Eddie, are you on the line? Do you know the hourly rate of the investigator?
It was never presented to us.
I'm asking our HR director.
I do. It's $395 per hour.
Holy God. That means she spent 126 and a half hours on this already. Yeah, I just think it's outrageous to pay that amount of money to collect a lot of emails and interview folks. Yeah, from my point of view, I think it's an outrageous charge. Too much. Absolutely. I don't want to pay another penny for this.
Thank you. If
I'd like to make one final comment, and that is.
Oh, please go ahead, Mr. Shurak. Go ahead.
That is that again, we're somewhat obligated to do this. I am a little surprised. I didn't know that it was $400 an hour either. And
were we ever presented with this? The price? Were we ever? Did the council pass on this?
I don't know that we ever were.
The original agreement was signed by me under my authority, and that's what attorneys typically charge.
Well, I don't think we're outside attorneys.
I think I would prefer we have a non-attorney do this work.
Yeah, exactly. This is
nuts.
We're being preyed upon. It's like vultures and roadkill, and we're the roadkill.
This is crazy.
Council members,
are you done, city council members, or would you like to continue to?
I would say whatever information she's got to turn over to another investigator that's going to charge a low price.
$400 an hour for
point of order, folks.
Outrage, absolute outrage.
Ms. City Attorney, please go ahead.
So, Mayor, this is a little awkward as how we're handling this, and I have to tell you, under the rules, under the conflict rules, under the FPPC, when you have a consent calendar item that is just being pulled briefly for some information, a member of the council has a conflict may stay on the dais because it's a consent calendar item and it's supposed to go very quickly. Given the direction that this conversation has taken, my advice to you would be that you not participate in the balance of this matter.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Calendar item.
Mayor Pro Tem, I will leave it in your hands and leave the room. I will not leave the meeting, but I will leave the room. And then I ask that Ms. City Manager and Ms. City Attorney, once this matter is resolved, if you would please make that oral call back for me to continue here. Thank you.
Thank you. In the meantime, if I may, to the council, I just want to remind you that you had your special outside legal counsel before you in closed session. He described this process. He told you what it was about. He told you why you had to do this investigation. And he also discussed with you potential consequences. I am not prepared to advise you on the specifics of this because I'm not the attorney handling this investigation or this matter, but I do want to remind you that you have had that update. And I would also remind you that Mr. Valdivia is now represented by legal counsel. And so I would advise that if you're ready to take action on this item tonight, you should. If you're not ready, I would recommend that that's not the right thing to do. But what is not going to help you is to have a prolonged conversation tonight about issues that you may or may not have discussed in closed session.
The city attorney, can we move this item to closed session then? For the next, whichever meeting, if it's a June meeting?
The issue is just money. It's money. And the public should know about this.
Correct, but the cost was not disclosed to us up front.
Never.
Never disclosed.
Okay, so here's the issue. You have an investigation that's pending. Your policy requires you to complete an investigation. Your public and members of this council have voiced significant frustration that you're not getting this done. This is a path to get you to the finish line with respect to the investigation. If you're not prepared to do that and you're not going to approve the rest of this contract, I would just ask you, what then would be your expectations?
I want a non-attorney to do the investigation.
You want a what?
I want a non-attorney. I don't want to be paying $400 an hour for an investigation that's more or less us just meeting a formality of the process. I haven't seen any work product. We're paying $400 an hour for attorney services now for more or less a routine investigation related to a harassment claim. May I finish?
Yes.
I am a council member. I am making a policy recommendation here. I would prefer that we have a non-attorney investigator to save taxpayer money. We are in a very tight budget situation. We should not be spending this kind of money for an attorney for services that does not require an attorney to provide this service.
Okay. May I make a suggestion in terms of process? I respect your views and what you'd like to do. My understanding is that you have a budget meeting upcoming. One of the things that you could do, I would ask the city manager if this might be appropriate, is to adjourn this item only to that meeting that you're having, which I believe is upcoming, and to get your special outside legal counsel on the line. I do recall in closed session, he explained to you why it was his recommendation that you use a lawyer investigator. I know he went into detail, but if you do need to ask him questions about that and why that was, my recommendation is not to continue this for 2 weeks, but to get him, into a conversation with you as soon as possible. Ms. City Manager, would that be possible to adjourn this item?
Well, our next meeting is actually tomorrow night, so I don't believe we can. So the agenda is already posted, and then the following meeting would be on June 2nd.
No, but you're legally allowed to adjourn just this item. You're allowed to say this item would continue to a date, to a specific time and place, or we would, but it would be an open session. If you wanted to schedule a closed session with your attorney, you would need 24 hours notice.
Okay, we don't have 24 hours.
Okay, I was trying to offer you a suggestion to be able to be responsive to the council members. Without that timing, I'm not sure that I can offer you an alternative of you either make a decision this evening or you wait until she can schedule a closed session with your outside counsel.
I'll wait with the closed session.
So the sentiment I have here is that that we're being taken advantage of, that the cost of this investigation, which is a formality, is costing way more than it should. We have attorneys. I've seen Sonia and Thomas, our city attorneys, do audits on our bills. Would you guys be capable of auditing those bills that have added up to $50,000 already for 2 individuals who have come forward with accusations? Would Sonia or city attorney, would you be able to investigate those and read those and see the billable hours and see whether they're justified or not? Because it does seem excessive. I think that's where a lot of this frustration is coming from.
So here's what I could do. Absolutely. I can work with the outside legal counsel. For potential conflict purposes, we were trying not to be involved with that, but I could work with outside legal counsel to discuss whether she could at least give us an update as to where the time has been spent. So did she interview 12 witnesses and it took 5 hours apiece for 12, or has she only interviewed 2 people and it took her 25 hours? I think some of those responses are good questions that you're asking, and I could see that we get that information to you. If there were a need to negotiate down rates or the work that was done, if we feel like we have with your other outside counsel, we have mandated that they reduce hours, we would be in a position to ask that on your behalf.
I mean, I don't think that if this investigation was wrapped up with $20,000, despite the fact that the city lost $20,000, most of the council members could stomach that. But we're now going in excess of $50,000 up to $80,000 for 3 individuals coming forward. That's why this frustration is.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
With that point taken, I do believe that we should be recessing this item to a meeting in the future when staff can come back with some answers as to why these investigators have charged so much, as well as some results from the $50,000 that we've already paid to these investigators. So both those items, this is 2 prongs. First, staff coming back or having the investigator come back as to why so much was billed. And second, the work for those first 2 individuals who have already had their time with the investigator. So we need to see some product for what we paid, and we need an explanation as to why the cost was so exceeding. Would that be fine?
I agree. No, we're being taken advantage of. We're being taken advantage of.
Staff, would you, city attorney, city manager, when can we expect that could come back before this council?
The next council meeting after tomorrow will be on June 2nd. It's the budget meeting. Would you like for a closed session at that meeting?
Would that be sufficient time?
I'm amenable to a special meeting scheduled for next week, either on Monday, Tuesday.
No, it's too many meetings.
Yeah, no, too many special meetings.
All right, so city manager, you had recommended the council meeting, was it next week?
We actually have, not next week, the following week.
June 3rd.
Let's do that.
June 2nd, June 3rd, and June 4th. If you'd like me to poll our attorney to see if he's available for one of those 3 days, would that be all right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Is everyone fine with that?
Yeah, and we want to have the explanation of the hours that were used.
Absolutely, yes. That would definitely be part of it.
Yeah.
All right. Are we done with this item? I understand the frustration.
So we're continuing.
And I think we had a good conversation.
Move to continue.
I'll second.
Oh, are we making a motion, or do we need to make a motion here?
Yeah.
All right, then we move to continue. All right, second. City Clerk, if you could take a roll call, please.
Okay, so I have the motion being made by Councilmember Mulvihill and second by Councilmember Ibarra to continue the item. And I'll start with Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Yes.
Councilmember Charette.
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel.
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
The item passes 6-0 to continue.
Shall we call back our mayor? Where is he? Someone go call him.
I just did.
All right. And then shall we wait or shall we move on to the next item?
Move on.
What was the next item pulled? City Clerk?
I'm back. I'm back and I'm not going anywhere, folks. I'm here. I'm here. Jim, I'm here. Councilman Mulvihill, I'm here. Okay, let's go to item number 18. Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes, I'd just like a staff report on this one, if possible. That's it. Tell us your plans. Thank you.
Shall I jump in? Okay. Thank you.
Can we be brief, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the item that you have in front of you is the city was notified in July of 2019 that we received some per capita funding through the Transit Stop Grant. It was just under about $27,000 for a project that would improve 2 bus stops within the city of San Bernardino. And the project does require a match from the city. That amount is about $6,700. Staff had originally put this project out to bid, and the results of that bid came back with a construction contract for about $71,000. We felt like that was too high. So we brought a recommendation to council. Council had rejected all bids. We did a second bid solicitation and got a more reasonable response on the construction. I believe it was about $58,000 in the staff report. The total project cost, when we add on a little bit for contingencies and some staff time, the total project cost is now at $66,000. So with the $27,000 grant, as well as our match amount, staff is currently requesting $39,000. Apologize, I lost my screen. A little over $39,000 from Measure I for the balance of the project. And if approved, the improvement construction is expected to start in July and be finished by September. The two locations for the bus stops are on Baseline and Sepulveda and 9th and Medical Center Drive.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
And if there is no objections, it's a consent calendar. I don't see any. All right, council members, thank you for your consensus on that. And Ms. City Clerk, if you take notes. Item number 19, this is a matter that was pulled by, uniquely pulled by Councilmember Ibarra. Want to encourage, this is a very, very important project. We are compromising. This is the final vote. In fact, over the weekend, I was contacted by staffers from the SBCTA that we need to move on this. We are jeopardizing some funding. This is one of the final steps here, folks. I'm going to, at this time, ask for a motion for approval, and then we'll give it over to Councilmember Ibarra.
I'll move approval.
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Charette, Councilman Sanchez. Ms. Ibarra, your final questions.
Sure. Can you tell me about that time frame? I mean, are they not allowed to have a public hearing like that speaker mentioned?
Ms. Ibarra, this has been a project in our city for multiple years. There's been multiple opportunities. There's been community outreach. There's been multiple venues for the public to speak via electronic, via person, pop-up opportunities. There has been extensive outreach.
Yeah, we even had a special meeting a couple of weeks ago about this as well.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of
With the
Any other
funding.
final
Yeah,
questions?
with the funding. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did have one quick just
Councilman
comment
Nicol.
that I received from a constituent. This is one of our oldest and most historic bridges left in the city. We've demolished many of our old structures. And one of my constituents asked if it might be possible to request of SBCTA to preserve maybe some of the railing, just some components of that old bridge that may be displayed at the new bridge. Just given the long history that this structure has had in our city, if there's some way we could preserve some components of it just for future generations.
Or
The,
maybe at the Santa
state
Fe
historic,
Railroad Museum.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
The Councilman Nicol, the very good point here. About 6 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, we hosted the State Historical Commission here in the city, and I welcomed them. And certainly I expressed a lot of the emblems that are keepsakes for our community. So with that duly noted, we'll ask that Ms. Jensen and our Ms. City Attorney or City Manager take those recommendations. Let's call for the questions. It's an important one, so we'll call for the roll, Ms. City Clerk.
Motion by Councilmember Charette, second by Councilmember Sanchez. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Yes.
Councilmember Charette?
Yes.
Councilmember Nicol?
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Finally, any items to be referred?
Yes, I've got it.
Okay.
I have an item.
Go ahead, Mr. Mulvihill.
Yeah, some months ago, when there was a shift, I think in one of the cannabis operations, right across the street from one of our senior high rises, because it wasn't zoned properly, I asked if there would be a review of any other kind of situation in the city whereby a large residential complex, such as a senior citizen, is not zoned as residential, so this wouldn't happen again. I just have that question. Is Mr. Huntley still here?
We can look into that, Mr. Mulvihill. What is your, oh, there you are, Mr. Huntley.
Yeah. Did you hear my question?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Have we looked into that?
Well, based on the existing ballot measure that was approved, that would allow, and kind of the way the ordinance is set up is looking at the downtown area, and the site in particular you're talking about is directly across the street from a Teleco property.
Exactly. It's a senior high rise, yes.
Correct. And that's within our downtown, allows for a variety of mixed use. And, you know, the way the cannabis regulations were set up, it didn't necessarily take that into account. So the way it's allowed today is currently the way it's allowed. I know that if in the future we were to move forward with amending the cannabis regulations, we could take a closer look at that.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Nickel, yes, sir.
Yeah, on along similar lines, I would like to request of staff that we get a status on our outstanding cannabis litigation in closed session, perhaps at our next closed session, just so we know where we're at in that process. And then several other items requested by constituents. I assume at some point we'll get a status update on our mall redevelopment, or the proposals and the status of that that process. I don't know, Mr. Huntley, do we anticipate when we may get a status on the mall project?
Well, we will get the proposals coming in the first part of June, and then the RFPs for the general plan update the middle part of June. So as soon as those come in, we'll actually provide a newsletter information to the city manager, and she'll disperse that to you.
Yeah. And then also, there's been a request, obviously, with this COVID crisis that we've been confronting over the past few months. Obviously, it's affected city operations. I know the city manager has been very busy preparing our budget, so I don't want to deviate from the work that needs to be done on that front. But at some point, I think all indications are there is a likelihood that we may have another flare-up potentially in the fall and the winter. And what are we learning in terms of our response currently, particularly as relates to first responders, law enforcement, and what adjustments might we make in terms of certain protocols, procedures? I know there are certain calls that we aren't responding to currently because of the potential threat of communicating a virus, but might there be some mechanisms in which residents can report criminal activity, particularly break-ins, burglaries, those types of criminal incidents, and provide evidence, perhaps video, photo evidence? My concern is it may impact our crime statistics if we aren't responding to some of these calls. So I'm not sure what the dimensions of that might be, but I think certainly at some point within the next several council meetings, I think it would be helpful for us to kind of look at what we've learned so far and what we may need to prepare for as we go forward if we have to go through another round of potential closures.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Boy, we got a lot of inquiries, and we got
one more question.
Council members that are really just wanting to stack it up here. Let's go with Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes, going off on the COVID, since our city has been working and trying to limit exposure of COVID, we're having a serious problem going on right now, and I don't know where we are. I know at the last meeting with city manager, I mentioned about possibly starting to open up our city. I know the counties from Southern California made a letter for the governor, and the governor seems to allow the counties to start opening up little by little already. We should start considering that. And going off on it, my concern right now is that our animal shelter is not accepting owner surrenders or stray animals. Over the weekend, we had several animals actually getting run over around the 210 freeway. And this is something, where do they go? They're stray, they're running out because of whether it's the fireworks or somebody lets them out, or they get out of their enclosures within their homes, and when they're being called in to pick up, they get turned away. There's been several witnesses that people get sent away, being told that they do not allow stray animals to be accepted, and what they end up doing is they leave the animals outside the animal shelter. This is becoming a safety hazard for our community, and I like to see already our animal shelters start accepting at least the strays and the owner surrenders to avoid further animals crossing in the street and getting run over and causing accidents around in the freeways.
Okay, Councilmember Ibarra, thank you. We will take that. We'll have City Manager reply to you. And then Councilman Figueroa, did you have something, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And quite frankly, I already know the answer to this and the timeline, but just simply to keep it on the radar of council members, just to get an update in regards to the landfill located on Vanderbilt and Carnegie, in regards to the Sportsplex. I'd like to get an update on that soon. And again, the city manager, I already know the answer and timeline to that. I just simply want to keep it on the radar. Thank you so much.
It was actually voted by consensus to bring it back mid-April. But in light of COVID, it was unanimous support from the council to hear a policy direction and a discussion on that. So, Ms. City Manager, it's still important, and we understand COVID and we understand the issues, but it was already agreed upon to bring it back in April. So we appreciate your expeditious bringing that back to our city council for that. All right. Thank you all. Oh, Councilmember Ibarra.
One more, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Going on pending items, I know we were waiting on the RFPs for the Carousel Mall. Is there an update to those proposals by any chance? Since I don't know.
Councilmember, if you listened, Mr. Huntley just about 4 minutes ago gave the roadmap and he provided that to us.
I may have missed it.
Okay, we'll send you an email on that. This meeting is adjourned.
No, I've got a question.
Oh, Mr. Mulvihill.
Exactly. Keep on missing me.
Oh, well, I can't see you because your screen is off, sir. So I apologize. Go ahead.
Why is my screen off?
I don't know. You have control on that. I don't. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I don't have any control of either myself. With regard to City Hall, the old City Hall, it was brought up before, kind of as an aside, to look into it. But I think seriously we need to examine it, the options. Obviously, we're going to have to partner with someone to retrofit it. I don't think destroying it is going to be an option. It's an iconic building. Would never have another building like it. If we choose to get rid of it, we really need to retrofit it, and we really need to get the options that we've got to handle it, whether it's a lease back, whatever happens to be. But I want that to be put on the top, the front burners.
Mr. Mulvihill, we've already decided to move that. So we're going to study that. We're going to bring it back. That was part of the motion.
Exactly. Thank you.
Great. Meeting adjourned, folks. Good night.